This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in a fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. There's no debate. The Jets lost. The Jets lost. I'm sorry. We tried. He's on assignment. You know.
He was out there cheering. I could see him. I could hear him.
He was out there. The game was over. That debate's over. 49ers forever. We say good morning to you on this debate day. We'll go to Philadelphia here in a moment. David Gurman will be with us as well. And the market's waiting for CPI tomorrow. All of a sudden CPI matters because there's this gauze of disinflation there driving every analysis.
Exactly. We had CPI tomorrow, Tom, and I think everybody's kind of thinking about 0.2% as month to month. And you want to annualize that, ex food and energy, 3.2%. That seems okay, but it's not, kind of where the Fed wants it to be. So we'll see what they do with their on September 18th.
Get right to it here on a Monday morning. Good morning, 99.1 FM Washington, our flagship. Good morning, New York. Perfect weather.
Perfect.
And it's shockingly
this time of year. Yep.
Gorgeous. It gets actually warmer here through the week. 11:30 a.m. in New York. Good morning, 92.9 FM in Boston. Okay, if the Red, we got to do it right now. Lisa, you're going to have to wait. If the Red Sox keep on keeping on.
Yep.
And the Mets are the best team in baseball right now.
Can't lose.
Do we get an 86 redux?
Oh, how good would that be?
Can we start modeling out Red Sox, Mets?
We'll be doing some remotes from Citi Field if that
A
happens.
little premature. From the Interactive Broker Studios of Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
You got it. And futures right now, we're in the red, and this is after all three major indexes kicked off the new trading week with gains of at least 1%. We have NASDAQ futures down about 0.1%, 26 points. Dow futures, little change, down 28 points. S&P futures, little change, down about a point. We have the two-year yield, 3.68%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 3.72%, and that's up 1 basis point. To commodities, we'll start with oil. Brent crude, $71 a barrel. WTI crude, $68 a barrel. Now, meanwhile, Chevron joined Exxon and Shell, shutting some wells ahead of Tropical Storm Francine. We head over to news. Shares of Apple and Google, they're lower to little change. Both companies lose key EU court decisions. European regulators are cracking down on tech companies. We have Apple down 1%, Google little change. And finally, the FTC battling Tapestry's acquisition of rival Capri. Yesterday, the CEO of Capri told a judge he's hopeful the planned $8.5 billion acquisition will revitalize its flagship Michael Kors brand and also deliver some return for investors. We have Tapestry up 1%. Capri is little change. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Tapestry, what happened at
Coach? Yeah.
Coach. Every time she says that, I want to go so far away.
Right.
Tapestry. It's Coach.
Coach.
I had the little thin red belt. David Gurman wouldn't be caught dead in this. This is like 40-something years ago.
Solid.
Handmade in Soho. It was like the coolest thing to have a Coach belt. Handmade by cobblers in Soho. Far away. Joining us right now from Philadelphia, he will have a long day and night of it. David Gurman driving forward our debate coverage. David, set the scene of the room where the former president and the present vice president will be in. What will that room feel like, sound like, be like?
It'll have a lot of the sterility of the last debate. The candidates will be in the National Constitution Center alone. There'll be no audience. A few pool photographers and reporters will be there. But the press filing center and the spin room, Tom, several blocks away at the convention center here in Philadelphia. So there'll be some remove, and I think that takes away a lot of the energy and excitement we might have had in past debates. But 2 podiums on stage. There was a coin toss. Former President Trump is elected to go last. He'll have the final word. He'll give the closing statement during the debate tonight. But much like the last one, a level of sterility and kind of quiet for these candidates.
Right.
2 moderators, David Muir of ABC News and Lindsay Davis, his colleague.
Can they cut each other off? Can they engage in conversation?
They can do it with the mics off. So this was a hard-fought issue over these last few weeks. Would there be muted mics as there was in Atlanta? And indeed, the Trump campaign won out here. There will be muted mics. That doesn't stop each candidate from trying to bait the other to get him or her to say something, get him or her off his game. but the mics will not be on. And I think that that's going to be interesting to watch here, because if you think back of the last major debate that Vice President Harris had with Vice President Pence, there were these moments when she told him to stop interrupting, said, "I'm speaking." Those caught fire. We're not going to have those kind of audibles we would have had these past debates.
But Paul, it's simple. Have we taken the debate out of the debate?
It almost feels like it. So, David, it feels like for Vice President Harris, this is a really, really big day for her, because most of America doesn't know her as well as we all know Donald Trump.
Yeah, you're seizing on something very important here. That last major poll, the New York Times Siena College poll, highlighted the fact that more than a quarter of respondents feel like they don't know who she is or what she stands for. This is the first debate between these two candidates, and perhaps the only one that's on the calendar right now. So it is a crucial, a pivotal moment for her to introduce herself to Americans who, again, don't feel like they know her, what she stands for, what she wants to do on a very major stage. I think there'll be a lot of eyes on the debate tonight, but she and her campaign taking this very seriously, preparing for this in a very traditional fashion, recognizing the fact that this is a signal moment in this very compressed but hard-fought campaign for her to make the case for her candidacy and introduce herself to the American people.
David Gurman, of course, the host of The Big Take, and at the debate in Philadelphia, scheduled to be with us in the 8 and the 9 hour. We promise he'll be awake then. David, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated. Eric Nielsen is awake. He is in England. Eric Nielsen is the chief economist of UniCredit Group, and it's always important to have him on because he is a Euro optimist. Eric, I'm going to rip up the script. I guess Brussels won a battle against Apple to recoup $13 billion. Does Europe want Apples in Europe? Does Europe want Googles in Europe?
Yeah, I'm sure they will, Tom. It's important to understand the context of this. This was a final ruling, as you said, of 13 billion against Apple, but it's facilitated by Ireland. So the point here is simply that they said Apple had received $13 billion worth of hidden or unfair subsidy, de facto, through the specific lower tax rate by Ireland. So they have to pay it to Ireland. And that be what it is, my big concern, and thank you for calling me a Euro optimist, it's difficult these days to be, the key issue here is that Ireland is taking in more tax revenue in dollars from American companies than all of the rest of Europe combined. Wow. As 1/3 more, right? And that is through these tax systems they have, which is, let's call it as it is, tax havens. And as a European, that I find deeply problematic. I don't blame Apple, I blame Ireland.
So, I mean, give us a sense of just kind of how Europe, broadly defined, views these big technology companies, which tend to be American tech companies. In terms of just supporting the growth of technology and taxation, how does Europe view big tech?
Yeah, I mean, so we have, if I should summarize, I mean, there's not one European view, right? But if I should summarize what I think is the common thinking in Europe on this is that it was a shame that we kind of lost out on the big industries after we had the mobile phones, Nokia and so on, doing very well. But we're not too unhappy about it. American is an ally. We like American companies. And I think Europeans were pretty good at applying the technology developed by the great tech companies in America. We put it into cars, we put it into all sorts of appliances, and did this very well. And we're free traders as industry. We are not too bothered where they come from. Then became the issue, of course, that the Chinese developed tech and offered it cheaper, and then national security concern developed along the same way as it has done in America. And then now with the Draghi report yesterday, you see it very clearly, and it's been rumbled for a while, that maybe we were a little bit too relaxed. Maybe we were a little bit too okay with importing all this stuff and having it all developed and produced elsewhere. So the thinking has certainly shifted. That's for sure.
Eric, we're going to leave it there. Eric, too short a visit. Let's do it longer next time. Eric Nielsen is with UniCredit. We'll get him on for a much more lengthy time. I've got a lot of questions on ECB versus the Fed. Eric Nielsen, he's great. He does an audible like that. Apple Technology.
Sure.
And then what'd you learn? I actually tuned in yesterday for a couple minutes.
I did too.
It's so canned. It's not like Tim or Steve walking around the stage in a black turtleneck.
No, but it's
produced.
It is. It's produced, but it's it's just another, just a long evolution of the iPhone, and there's not revolutionary changes, I don't think, anymore. It's just a continued evolution of the iPhone. I guess we call it a camera, I guess, now with a phone here. So that's kind of where we are. But I'll be ready to walk into my Verizon store not into distant future.
They're already out. I was up, when I read my 10 newspapers at 1 a.m. and T-Mobile's out screaming.
Are they? Good. Okay.
Verizon's sort of out. AT&T's out screaming.
Are they? Okay.
Free. It's
really?
It's free.
No kidding.
How do they say that? I mean,
don't know.
somebody's paying somewhere.
Somebody's paying somewhere.
We'll have much more on this. And Mark Gurman, when you see, according to Bloomberg, about Apple coverage, it's Mark Gurman.
Yep.
He is the #1 Apple expert in the world. Honored to have him from the West Coast in the 9 o'clock hour. With our news in New York City, John Tucker.
All right, Tom, Paul, Lisa. SpaceX launching a rocket carrying 4 private astronauts to space, part of the groundbreaking mission aimed at performing the world's first commercial spacewalk.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Go Falcon.
Signature moment of this mission set to occur on the 3rd day of the flight. The countdown, of course, on for the highly anticipated presidential debate tonight in Philadelphia. Bloomberg's Amy Morris looking at how the candidates are preparing. Amy.
Vice President Harris's strategy, in part, is reportedly to hold former President Trump accountable while maintaining a calm demeanor on stage. Harris's challenge is that she's not well defined to a lot of potential voters. Donald Trump, on the other hand, is quite well defined. People know him. His strategy may be to change some perceptions and soften his edge a bit. Bob McNally is a former White House energy advisor to President George W. Bush, and he told Bloomberg News what he'd be listening for.
I hope they get pressed on their respective plans for Iran, because in terms of what's going to affect the pump price for you, me, and our neighbors, I think it has to do with Iran.
Bob McNally talking with Bloomberg's Joe Matthew. This debate is the biggest opportunity the candidates may have to reset the conversation and their image now that the conventions are over and officials anticipate a huge viewing audience. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
And officials tracking Tropical Storm Francine as she churns in the Gulf of Mexico. The outer bands will impact the Texas coastline as it veers eastward through Louisiana's basin and the states just north. The storm could become a Category 2 hurricane by Wednesday when it's expected to make landfall. Global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Paul, Lisa, Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. Future Slides, Paul Sweeney, the Sweeney yield. I mean, the 2-year yield.
Yep.
It's back to September of 2022.
It is. We're 3.67%, Tom, and just it wasn't too long ago that you're getting 5%. You're getting 5% on your 2-year Treasury. So we've had the Treasury market pretty much kind of just get in front of this Federal Reserve. The market's already pricing in rate cuts on the short end.
I saw a major bank last night, 3-month money. They want to give you 5.00%. How do they do that?
I don't know.
I don't know how they do that.
I don't know, but that's not bad. I mean, for a couple of...
But not bad. It's phenomenal.
It's phenomenal. I mean, it's been 15 years since we've seen those kinds of rates.
We'll have to see. Futures at -1, the VIX 19.73. Please stay with us. Nationwide, Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures in the red as markets prepare for more economic data with the Consumer Price Index set for tomorrow. NASDAQ futures down about 0.1%, 24 points. Dow futures little change, down 23 points. S&P futures are little changed as well. We go to the 2-year yield, 3.69%, up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 3.72%, and that's up 1 basis point. To currencies, the yen weakened after sources say BOJ officials see little need to hike rates next week. Right now, the Japanese yen is 143.12 against the dollar. Euro, British pound stronger. Bitcoin up about 0.2% at 57,000. To earnings we go. Shares of Oracle up 8%. Quarterly profit bookings topped estimates. That was a big thanks to AI demand. And shares of BMW falling down 6% in Germany. The car maker cut its outlook for the year. They pointed to this faulty braking system from a supplier. It caused a recall of 1.5 million vehicles. Now, after the bell, we'll hear from the likes of GameStop and Dave & Buster's. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, are you doing Bloomberg News Now? Is that something you do in your free time?
In my free time.
You know.
But it's great. No, it's like it's 24. It's 24/7. It's always there. 5 minutes or under. You
It's
get
exploding.
to know
It's like-
everything
it's
about
like
what's
there's a
going on.
podcast,
NPR,
right?
You know,
Podcast.
NPR did
Podcast,
this.
okay.
NPR did this, and we're trying to do it with a business take and a news take.
Yeah.
And it's like ginormous. I mean, Hager won't speak to me now.
Hager, Karen
Nathan
Moscow,
Hager is so
yes.
large on this that, you know, I can barely get a
We got
conversation.
the players
with him.
doing this. Okay.
Bloomberg News Now. Go out to Apple Podcasts, sign up for it, and I kid you not, it's like every hour. I mean,
Yep.
they're like serious about this. It's addictive, and it's it's got all the it's got the stars we don't have.
I know,
You know,
I know.
I mean, it's got Moscow and
Yep.
Amy Morris.
Amy Morris.
Yep. the
This
best.
is a joy. There is no one from sea to shining sea in academics who's actually done it. Jennifer Lawless joins from UVA, out of Union. The way you get into Union College is you spell Schenectady.
Oh, boy.
Boom, you're
Forget
in.
it.
Professor Lawless, thank you so much for joining us. What separates you from every other academic out there? Because you actually ran for a congressional district. You lost. But what's the difference in Jennifer Lawless versus all the other blathering academics?
Well, I wouldn't say most of them are blathering, some for sure. But I did run for Congress in 2006. So I think I have a little bit of a different kind of understanding of what
Yeah.
actually goes into campaigns and elections.
You are one of 3 or 4 people, seriously, who can answer the question I get all the time. Why is America still not voted for a female president? Just synthesize that across your work at Stanford, at UVA.
The real answer is that there just haven't been enough female candidates to do it. So first of all, it is important to remember that Hillary Clinton received more popular votes than Donald Trump did. So it's not that Americans aren't willing to vote for a woman. Now, obviously, we elect our president through the Electoral College, so winning the popular vote didn't matter, but public opinion was on her side. But that's really been the only opportunity that the American people have had until heading into Election Day this year to cast a ballot for a female president. When it comes to Congress, when it comes to state legislatures, gubernatorial elections, women do just as well as men. The key is that they need to run in the first place.
Professor, how important is tonight for both of these candidates?
It's important. I don't think it's deal-breaking important the way that the June 27th debate was for Trump or Biden, but it's probably their only debate. It's the first time that they'll meet each other and that the American people will see them meet each other. And it's their opportunity not only to define themselves, but try to define their opponents to both voters and the global stage.
So I guess one of the issues here for Vice President Harris is to try to introduce herself a little bit and her policies and her outlook to the American public. How would you coach her about how to approach this evening?
I think the most important thing she needs to do is to decide which policies she wants to embrace from the Biden administration, and those will likely be the ones that have been working, and which that she'd like to distance herself from a little, and those will be the ones that still need a degree of help. So I can imagine her embracing her record on reproductive rights, what the Biden administration has tried to do in a post-Dobbs world. I can also imagine her putting forward some new ideas when it comes to inflation, when it comes to prices, when it comes to the border, because people are not satisfied with the way that the Biden administration has handled those issues. So it's a tough needle to thread because she wants to achieve success and distance herself at the same time.
Is this the moment, and I guess former President Trump moving to the middle maybe isn't going to happen just based off everything he said over the last 90 days. But is this where she moves to the middle, where she signals, I'm like Reagan, I got to get nominated by being a conservative, but now, like Clinton, frankly, I move to the middle? Is this evening where it happens?
I'm not sure that she's going to move to the middle because she's already been perceived as flip-flopping on a lot of issues. So I think what she needs to do is demonstrate that she has a set of policy proposals that will work for people in the middle, even though she ultimately is a Democratic liberal.
But Professor, does policy proposals get you elected?
They don't, but not having them can cost you an election. So the nuances of her border policy are not going to be what wins the election, but for every single day that the Republicans and the Trump campaign can bash her for not having a clear border policy could hurt. So it's difficult. People don't vote on policy nuance, but they're turned off when there seems to be a lack of detail.
So on the other side of the aisle, Professor, former President Trump, any guidance you would provide that campaign for this evening?
You know, this is going to be about discipline versus policy. Kamala Harris has to demonstrate that she has policy chops, which is a little bit ironic given that she's been the vice president. And Donald Trump needs to demonstrate that he can make it through 90 minutes without coming undone. Those are not comparable bars, but they might be equally difficult to achieve for both candidates.
Right. David Gurrow was just with us. He'll join us, folks, here in 35 minutes. Professor Lawless, David Gurrow talked about the sterility of the debate versus others where there's an audience. Does the sterility benefit either of these candidates?
Donald Trump plays to an audience, so it's not his ideal situation. But Kamala Harris likes to prosecute. And so even though the sterility of the debate might not hurt her, the muted mics might. So she's not going to be able to fact check him in real time. She's not going to be able to ask direct questions the same way that he's not going to be able to get energy from an audience.
Professor, thank you so much. Really appreciate this. Let's do this again. Jennifer Lawless, UVA, just truly excellent on the female effort across America in politics. Her major theme is the ambition of more women getting into the process and doing more and such. Future's flat. Alyssa says to the tape, we look at inflation tomorrow, and I guess we're just trying to see a disinflation. I haven't even looked at the ECO GOLET. Let's do that right now in the Bloomberg.
We got that tomorrow. Professional
Service, and it's sort of on target. Year-over-year CPI comes in from 2.9 to a survey of 2.5. But if you take out housing and rent, I think the statistic is lower.
Yeah, so it is. And so we've got, I think the way the economists are telling us, Tom, is inflation is moderating, still has room to go here, but that doesn't mean much to the consumer out there who knows that their box of cereal costs a lot more today than it did 3 or 4 years ago.
20% more. It's
exactly.
Just the ruling, the general number I use.
And that's what we're all dealing with. So even though the rate of inflation is coming down, it's a little solace for a lot of folks.
It'll be interesting to see. Heaven forbid they'd actually talk Bloomberg surveillance themes at the debate tonight.
They should.
Economics, finance, investment.
Yep.
So, they can do a line item 2 minutes on unrealized gains.
Exactly. I don't think so.
I don't think we'll.
That wouldn't be great television.
Get there as well. Lisa Mateo, Paul Sweeney, and Tom Keene. Michael Barr is off. He witnessed Monday Night Football last night.
Yeah, and
like
it didn't
7
go that
rows
well
up.
for the Jets. But I tell you what, the silver lining. Mr. Rogers is still standing, so he's ready for week 2.
That one spectacular pass was something. I was like, you know what you look for. We're going to continue on here on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Thank you so much for this distribution worldwide. Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, they're killing it. Out with new updates. I don't think they mentioned it at the Apple show yesterday, but you get the new phone, you get a better Apple CarPlay. That's all there is to it. From New York City, across the nation, Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, we've got a mix of red and green on the screen. Investors looking to balance U.S. recession fears and likelihood of a soft landing. That's what they're looking for in NASDAQ futures right now. Little change, down about 13 points. Dow futures down about 9 points. S&P futures up about 2. We have the 2-year yield 3.69%, up 2 basis points. A yield on the 10-year 3.72%, and that's up 2 basis points. To commodities, spot gold lower, $2,504 an ounce. We have Brent crude $71 a barrel, WTI crude $67 a barrel. Few companies making news. Well, shares of TSMC, they're up about 0.5% in Taiwan. Revenue jumped 33% last month. AI spending holding up and the smartphone market recovering. Maersk said sees a growing risk of U.S. dock worker strike with no labor agreement reached yet. Shares down about 0.1% in Copenhagen. And David Solomon said Goldman Sachs trading revenue, well, it's set for a steeper than expected drop this quarter from the previous year, and that's due to declines in fixed income. Shares down about 0.5%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. Good morning across the nation. On YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Thank you for that effort. It's the number one way you can help Lisa Mateo. There's no other way to put it. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts out there. Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. Good morning across the nation. Good morning, 20 nations worldwide with Apple CarPlay. Okay. And good morning to those on radio nationwide, including 99.1 FM in Washington, Bloomberg 1130 in New York, and good morning. Just thrilled with the initial days of 92.9 FM in Boston. I'm going to get a question out of the way right now to Anurag Rana, who's expert on the cloud and how we use it on Apple, because Paul wants to ask about desert titanium and the amount of RAM he should get. Anurag, I go mental, you know this, because there's not enough discussion of the chip. I was thrilled that Apple actually laid out the A18 Pro 3-nanometer chip.
Wow.
How spectacular is that 6-core beast?
Yeah, the fun thing over there is, and I didn't know till several years ago, they really do this in-house. And that's really spectacular because they designed the chip, get TSMC to make it, and really help their products. I'll tell you something. Last week I was at my sister's place, looked at her laptop. It was so hot, and that's what the Windows laptop. You take that with a Mac, you're never going to feel that, and a lot of that is driven by their chip and the way they innovate around that area.
All right, so let's put into context yesterday, Anurag. What is it? The launch of some of these products here, the iPhone 16, which I'll be upgrading to here in the coming days. What does it mean for the company? What does it mean for the stock?
So if you look at it, over the last 3 years, we have not seen any improvement in unit shipments sold per year. Some of that you could blame it on economic weakness in China. Some of them you could say that the hardware has not been upgraded. And frankly speaking, yesterday the hardware upgrade wasn't there in terms of the shape of the phone or any of the noticeable features. But still at the same time, if you go back in the time frame of what you're saying, FY21 and around that area, they did sell a lot of phones. And that cohort is going to go out and refresh right now. So we think you should get about a 5% bump in unit shipments. And the other factor is people are skewing towards the higher end model, which is the Pro and the Pro Max, as Tom was talking about the chip, which means that the revenue impact is more than 5%, which we think could be, somewhere in the range of 7, 8, 9%.
I just noticed this. Everybody, publishing yesterday, maybe Dan Ives went to $300.
Did he?
I think he was at $285.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm making this up, folks.
All right.
We do that on surveillance.
Well, I can tell you.
I see a $300 statistic on Dan Ives.
Well, that's the number. It's on the Bloomberg terminal. That's the number. So, Anurag, is AI? Talk to us about where Apple is with AI. Do they feel like they're there? Is this the first step? Where are we with Apple and AI?
So, in our view, Apple controls probably one of the most important and most lucrative distribution system in the world. And for them, they really don't need to go out and spend billions of dollars in CapEx to capitalize on this thing. Oracle reported yesterday, they said they're going to double their CapEx. Microsoft is going to spend 15, 20, 25 billion extra than they did last year. Apple's case, none of that stuff. They have the phone in your hand. They're saying, you want to use OpenAI, you use OpenAI. I won't be surprised if they actually license Google's Gemini also in down the road. So for the user, you won't know what's happening in the back end. You're going to get some cool features on your phone, which is going to customize your phone very different than what it is for me or Tom. And I think that's really Apple's AI play.
Are they with the sales deals they have with T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, and all, and I assume internationally, are they taking gross market share from Samsung, Huawei, and the other players?
They don't really believe in that game, Tom, and I don't think that's that's the game they play. They want to basically say, you come to us when you're ready and you can afford this phone. So they're not going after the lower end Android. But if you're a higher end Samsung customer, it's very unlikely you're going to choose Apple anyway. When we ran our survey, they have a very high customer loyalty rate in the 90s, whereas the Android phones is somewhere in the 80s. So people, when they get, I would say, a little bit richer, they migrate from Android to iOS, and very few people go the other way around.
Talk to us about what's the latest in China here. I mean, are they at a position where they can maybe start growing again in China, Anurag?
I think that's the biggest uncertainty over the next 12 months. I think where the bulls are going to get it wrong next year, if China starts to deteriorate in terms of economic conditions. They're already not so good, but I think this is for my expectations of 5% unit shipments. The way that can go wrong is if China goes downwards. The big upgrade, and again, we got to thank Mark Gurman for all the stuff that he did. Everything Apple announced yesterday, he had already talked about it. There was not one surprise in our view. iPhone 17 is going to be a game changer compared to the hardware. At that time, over the next 12 months, you're going to see.
Anurag, we got to stop the show worldwide there. Are you telling Paul Sweeney to wait for the iPhone 17?
No, his phone can't handle it. He has to get the 16. It's more of a...
He knows. So I mean, but what is the iPhone 17? What is that going to do, do you think?
Oh, that's going to be a thinner model, completely changed in terms of the look of it. And by that time, a lot of the AI applications that we are talking about right now, which is in, you could say, the beta mode, or the people haven't really created those applications, that would be widely accessible. So it's going to be a staggered launch of a lot of these AI features. These AI features are not going to be available in EU at this point. They're not going to be available in China. But over the next 12 months, it will show up slowly and slowly. So we think that super cycle everybody is talking about, that's going to come for the next phase of the phone, not the one that was released yesterday.
You can't see this on radio, folks. Lucky you. But Anurag's got the AirPod thing stuck out of his ear as well. Did they make a jump condition yesterday, Anurag, in the AirPod things?
Yeah, I think the concept that it's going to help people hear better is just phenomenal. But to be honest, there's one particular gadget I don't have. I've stayed away from it, and that's the Apple Watch. But I'm going to order one, the Ultra one, on Friday, because that was beautiful. That certainly changed my view of the wearable device. I think that's good.
We'll let you go so you can go to the Apple store and empty the checkbook. Anurag Rana, thank you so much. With Bloomberg Intelligence, he's expert in the cloud. We'll get him on here with all the tech companies. Look at the cloud. I mean,
it's cloud, it's AI.
We sort of fake it. I mean, you look around the table here, folks, at our world headquarters. Matteo, Tucker, Sweeney, Keene, the foremost tech unsavvy people on the planet. I mean,
I used to be cutting edge. I don't know what happened.
The big debate this morning, we're trying to be adults here and have a good conversation. The big debate is desert titanium is not brown.
Right. No.
It's not brown.
It's
a different
desert titanium.
Well, but Lisa, do you have a case on your phone?
I do. Yeah, I used to have the OtterBox because I've dropped it so many times.
I have this one. I'm not going to
one.
sell the brand, but this has saved me so many times. You can drop it from 4 stories up and it won't break or something.
Yikes.
But they make such a big deal about the finish and all.
Yeah, but
no one ever sees it.
They put a cheap case around it.
I don't know. Anyways, that was great. And of course, Mark Gurman with us here in an hour and a half. That's a really special attendance this morning. David Gura in 20 minutes on the debate. Futures in -4 with our news in New York City. John Tucker.
All right, Tom, Paul, and Lisa, the first and, for now, only debate between Vice President Harris and former President Trump just hours away. Candidates face off for 90 minutes tonight for the ABC News presidential debate. And Bloomberg senior Washington correspondent Sulla Mohsen says this will be a unique encounter for at least one reason.
We're going to see Kamala Harris meet Trump. It's going to happen before our eyes. They're going to meet for the first time, shake hands for the first time ever. That's also rare. We're seeing Harris prepare methodically, like a student, like she did in law school, as a prosecutor. And Trump is a chaos agent where there are no rules.
Sulla Mohsen reports Trump has agreed to ABC's rules that mics will be muted when it's the other candidate's turn to speak. The Harris campaign had lobbied against that, saying it would put the former prosecutor at a disadvantage. And, of course, our coverage begins 8 p.m. Wall Street time on a special edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television. Well, we had liftoff.
4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And go Falcon, go Polaris.
The SpaceX Falcon has launched a Polaris Dawn to low Earth orbit from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Mission intended to include the first fully commercial spacewalk using a spacesuit developed by SpaceX. The crew capsule is intended to fly in an elliptical path around the Earth at a maximum distance of about 870 miles. Americans were duped out of more than $5.6 billion last year through fraud schemes involving cryptocurrency. The FBI says it received nearly 70,000 complaints last year by victims of financial fraud involving Bitcoin, Ether, and other cryptocurrencies. Most rampant scheme was investment fraud. That accounted for $3.96 billion of those losses. And a legendary actor with a legendary voice. That's how James Earl Jones is being remembered. He died Monday at the age of 93 in Disney's Lion King. He was the king of the jungle. Of course, he was also the voice of Darth Vader and even CNN. He was born in Mississippi in 1931 to what's described as an unstable household. He ended up moving to Michigan when he was 5, raised by his maternal grandparents, as well as known as he became known for his voice in a lot of the movies. He said that move when he was young was so traumatic, it actually caused him to stammer and stutter. So for years, to hide that, he just didn't even talk.
Wow. Yeah, the scene in Field of Dreams, I mean, everybody's got different scenes in that. But the scene in Back Bay where the VW van turns around on the rainy street.
And he's standing there.
And he's standing there is just extraordinary.
Yep.
Absolutely. Just unbelievable. When they film that, and I've seen people at Fenway literally try to search for the seats. They're out there somewhere. Anyways, that's great. Paul, I think we've got to talk about the markets. We haven't really touched upon the markets. Torsten Slok at Apollo with a blistering note this morning.
Yep.
We're not in a recession.
We're not, and he's been so clear on that for such a long time. He's really been a voice of reason out there when everybody was saying, hey, this thing's rolling over. And he just said, I'm just not seeing it. The data's just not showing it. Are we slowing from certain levels? Yes. But are we in the risk of a recession? By his data and his analysis, no.
Corporations adjust, and you see it in the Apple thing. I mean, the fancy phone I'm looking at, folks, I'm not an Apple fanboy, but the technology's great. I'm sure I'm sliding into $1,200, $1,300, $1,400, but I'm not.
Well,
3/4 of the phones, and this is corporations just getting it done.
Yeah.
The wireless carriers.
Yep.
Come on down.
A great way to play the wireless story is the tower companies. The people that own the towers upon which all this wireless stuff bounces off of around the country. That's a good business.
Now, thanks to Interagwana for that. And again, Mark Gurman coming up here on the day. Lisa's been on. She's been looking. She's looking teal. I think
Is that where she's going?
I think the phone, the teal, not the pink one. I mean, Lisa's more like teal.
Yeah.
I mean,
Stylish.
that's her style color. Futures flat. The VIX 19.72. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got red and green on the screen as investors gear up for another key inflation report out tomorrow, a key U.S. presidential debate tonight, and also the European Central Bank's policy meeting later this week. We'll also get more Fed speak today. That's from the Fed's Michael Barr and Michelle Bowman. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures. Little change, down about 6 points. Dow futures down about 16 points. S&P futures up about 2. We have the 2-year yield, 3.68%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 3.72%, and that's up 1 basis point. To commodity, you have spot gold lower, $2,504 an ounce. We have Brent crude $70 a barrel, WTI crude $67 a barrel. Now, we talked about Apple losing that key EU decision. It came a day, though, after its big event where it unveiled the iPhone 16, new AI technology, upgrades to its Apple Watch and AirPods. But speaking of AirPods, this is an interesting twist. European hearing aid stocks, they fall in the news that Apple's AirPods are set to become approved as hearing aids. So now you have Sonova, the parent company of Phonak here in the U.S., down 2% in Switzerland, Amplifon down about 4% in Italy. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. I'm Keene and Paul Sweeney here this morning. And, you know, we got through the first weekend of football, and to me, it's just ever more evident it's all that's left.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just no other. It's just so now.
It's so big. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger every year. The NFL.
And there's like what, 5 distribution points now in my living room.
Yeah, I would think so, Tom. And I mean, a lot of folks, you know, wanted to watch a game on Peacock. If they don't have Peacock, they're not seeing the game. So, but I don't know. It's all over the place. You have to be a tech, I think, pretty savvy to be able to watch all the games you want to watch.
And you're going to spend money. I mean, we mentioned Sportico adds it up to $788.
Exactly.
A year.
I mean, you kind of long back to the days when you had a cable package and you paid one bill and you kind of got pretty much everything you wanted.
I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. We saw survive week 1. Michael Barr with a full report.
Yes.
When he gets back from week, he won't come back.
No, maybe not. But his Lions won, so I mean, he's feeling good there.
That was exciting as well. Red and green on the screen.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Your daily look at the front pages, Lisa Mateo Hour, brought to you by IBKR with the Interactive Brokers. Forecast Trader, you can trade your views on key economic and climate indicators. Visit ibkr.com/forecast and get started today. Thank you, Interactive Brokers. Lisa, you're all fired up over there.
I am fired up. You remember we talked about the Wall Street Journal's list of overall college rankings, right? The best colleges for your kids.
Urian Timmer, Babson yesterday.
Babson, yes, that was in the list too. Now this is looking at the best salaries list. So the Wall Street Journal has the colleges that are making graduates the most money. At the top, Ivy League colleges, those with strong tech programs. Number 1,
Shocked.
MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Early career earnings had a median of just over $133,000. Now, it also had a lot of success stories from alumni.
Whoa. Did you say starting pay?
Starting, yes.
It's a 133?
133.
22.5 I made in 1986.
Really? My first job, $18K.
You were living
newspapers,
large.
Yes.
Yeah.
Woo!
I remember looking at it going, they take that much in taxes?
Exactly. What's FICA? That's what my first question.
Number 2, Stanford University. Okay. They said that entrepreneurship pipeline, of course, into the tech companies. Princeton University, number 3. Private universities, though, 36 of the top 50 spots on that salary list. All right. But STEM programs, Georgia Tech was 4th, so STEM programs also.
Yeah, but
serious engineers.
To me, there's a divide between kids going to college, whether they're taking art history or electrical engineering, if they're working their tail off, or are they just sliding through? What percentage is just sliding through?
I'm probably in the sliding through category. That's why.
You know, I just.
Especially at business school.
Chuck Lieberman was in yesterday. Chuck Lieberman, good morning. Iconic equity investor. He's got that MIT ring on his finger.
Yeah.
With the bear.
Playing around with those people.
No, it's a beaver. Excuse me. The beaver.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah, it's a classic. It's like Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Jess Metten's got the Texas A&M ring on, an Aggie ring. It's a hunk of gold. Next.
Well, keep it with education. So the Boston Globe had this interesting article. A lot of parents, more parents in the 3 of Boston's largest suburbs, they're sending the kids to private schools. So they're switching them from public to private. We're talking about Brookline, Cambridge, Newton. They have about 30,000 school-age children. So 1 in 5 now attend private or parochial schools. The reason why experts are saying COVID had a lot to do with it, in September 2020, a lot of private schools brought the students back full-time, but the public schools stayed online.
Interesting.
And a lot of parents want that more challenging environment for the kids. They say that the private school does that for them. They have the smaller class sizes as well.
To me, it's nationwide.
So it is nationwide.
The articles
yes,
in the
they
Globe,
they do get to that. Yes.
Up in New England, they have so many good private schools up in New England, as they do around here in the greater
Sure.
New York area. But
yeah, I just think COVID. We don't
COVID was huge
understand.
for that.
We don't understand with our kids. I mean, we're living this every day. I mean, the vet bill hasn't recovered from COVID, but I'm sorry, we don't understand what COVID did to the kids' learning cycles. Just that they're behind. Period.
Yep.
That's all there is to
They are.
it.
And then public schools have budget cuts, strikes. I mean, there's so many different issues for the public
In
schools
New York
to,
as well.
to deal with. Yeah, everywhere.
Next, what do you got?
Okay, NFL season, right? You've been talking
There we
about
go.
it. Underway, okay? But experts are seeing more bankruptcies in states that have legalized sports betting.
so personal bankruptcies.
Yes, consumer bankruptcy attorneys. They're
Okay.
telling Bloomberg, they're starting to see gambling debts more often. It's happening in the states with the sports betting apps. Here's what the studies show. Residents in those states shown early signs of financial distress, a 28% increase the likelihood of bankruptcy filings. It could get worse because Americans expected to report a record $35 billion in legal bets through the NFL season, up from $27 billion last year. So you see the difference. A lot of them men in their 20s and 30s.
Yep.
That's who's placing the
Okay.
bets. But yeah, there.
Can I ask a dumb question? And the guy at Bloomberg Intelligence is expert on this in gambling.
Brian Egger. Yep.
Does anybody win
The house.
in the long run? I mean, like,
House wins.
Re-
That's why they build these huge casino hotels and swimming
Oh.
pools and.
but like over 3 weeks of NFL, is there somebody that wins over 3? Forget about the season.
Yeah, I don't know.
Just to give, and they go, oh my, OMG, I made a lot of money.
Bet
don't
with your
know.
head,
I don't-
not over it.
Yeah.
That's what they say. But I guess some people.
I don't have that kind of like. But they're blowing through their 401ks by.
I'm still
So
not used to
it's
this.
Crazy.
I'm back with Pete Rose, and I'm not. I mean, we're
It's
full
so
gambling.
easy with your phone, though. I mean,
That's the
you can do
problem.
intro
Yes, they're
game
saying
bets,
it's made
just,
it easier.
I mean,
more accessible, right? It's right there.
and it's just we'll see. But it's
okay.
I don't have 28 states or something like that has legalized gambling.
30,
I don't know
yeah.
30, something
Yeah,
like
about
that.
30
Yep, there we
Is
go.
that it, or you got one more?
No, one more.
Yes.
This one's a dinger. Okay. Halloween, right? Just
Nope.
over a month away.
Nope.
Walmart has a costume for adults that cater to, let's say, open relationships. So it's a
Nice.
costume of 3. It comes in a
Thruples.
set of 3. Thruples.
Yes, that's a
what
term. I
they're
learned that.
calling it. I never heard that word before today. So Walmart calls it. It's a couple's 3-piece s'mores costume. Okay.
S'mores bar.
S'mores.
Okay,
So you have
s'mores
one
thing.
who's a piece of chocolate, one who's the marshmallow, and one who's the graham cracker. Okay, it sells for about $27. But the New York Post says it's gaining popularity. Social media,
Sure.
the throuple costume. More people are to that open relationship.
Nice. All right.
Calling it that.
Rich, is this a family network?
I called it open. There's other names for it. But studies show Gen Zers, that's what they're more kind of open to.
Good for them.
This costume becoming more popular. Yes.
Have fun with that.
So this Halloween, have fun.
It used to be simple. Are you going as Elsa or the other girl? Let it go, let it go. It used to be, Halloween's for kids.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. Adults are
to
getting
do it.
huge
Yeah,
parties,
they have the adult Halloween parties.
I remember when it switched.
That's
You ready?
fun. When?
Coors Beer. The Elvira campaign, to me, shifted the country. It was so successful. And that's when the bars all picked up on it big time and all that.
Big Halloween.
Yes,
But to me, it was for kids and all that. We'll have to see. Red Agree. Thank you, Lisa. Lisa Mateo on the newspapers. This is, something.
Yep.
We're doing some James Earl Jones music today. Born to be Wild, sort of part of that energy, a field of dreams. Steppenwolf. Good morning, everyone. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning, Boston. Good morning, Washington. Good morning across the nation.
Exploding through space.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. Good morning. It is Bloomberg Surveillance across this nation on Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Good morning, Phoenix, Arizona. We'll get there in a bit as well. And around the world, we say red and green on the screen, the VIX 19.60. Paul, a debate. I mean, this is it.
This is it
tonight.
I think, and this may be it, Tom. This may be the debate. This may be the time for Vice President Harris to kind of introduce herself to the broader electorate, I guess.
I have to see from the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And we've got a mix of red and green on the screen after all three major indexes kicked off the new trading week with gains of at least 1%. We have NASDAQ futures up about 10 points, Dow futures down 20 points, S&P futures up about 4. We have the 2-year yield at 3.68%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 3.72%, and that's up 1 basis point. To commodities, want to turn to oil. We have Brent crude at $70 a barrel, WTI crude $67 a barrel. Chevron, Exxon, Shell shutting down some wells ahead of Tropical Storm Francine. Then we have companies making news. Apple and Google, both companies lost multi-million-dollar court fights with the EU. European regulators cracking down on tech companies. We have Apple down about 1%, Google up about 0.2%. And finally, the FTC battling Tapestry's acquisition of rival Capri. Yesterday, you had the CEO of Capri. He told the judge that he's hopeful that planned acquisition is going to revitalize its flagship Michael Kors brand. We have Tapestry up about 1%, Capri down about 0.2%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Bloomberg Surveillance. We're brought to you by Cohn Resnick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Discover game-changing strategies to maximize value, optimize performance, and manage risk. Put your business at the forefront. Thank you, Cohn Resnick, for your support. Quickly to Philadelphia, David Gurra there for the debate tonight. David, I saw one poll, Trump's ahead. I saw another poll, Harris is ahead. Discuss.
Yeah, the issue here, Tom, is momentum, and I think that's what the Harris camp is paying closest attention to. So the most recent one is that New York Times Siena College poll, neck and neck, within the margin of error. This is such a strange campaign. There wasn't a convention boost or bounce for Vice President Harris afterward, but it seems like it has started to stall, or there are signs of that happening. That's what they're fearing here, and they want this debate to be a catalyst, a Kickstarter to see if she can move up in the polls again. And they are pouring, Tom, as you know, hundreds of millions of dollars into TV and digital ads going into the election day, an unprecedented amount of money, more than $300 million. So this is part of that plan, part of their hope that it's going to introduce her to a lot more Americans and have a real kind of booster effect for her campaign.
David, from the Harris camp, what would be a victory tonight in Philadelphia?
You know, these debates aren't watched by many people in their full 90-minute form. There are moments that go viral, that are memed, and I think that that's what they're looking for here tonight. Yes, it's about introducing her and her policies to more Americans, but it's finding these few signal moments that are going to catch fire and sort of use them to introduce the candidate to more people, make them more comfortable with each of them. So they're going to be looking for those tonight. And suffice to say, yes, they've been prepping on policy, how they're going to comport themselves on stage, but I think they've also probably, both of them, been looking for opportunities or planning for opportunities when they can find those sort of short moments that will catch fire beyond the stage tonight.
Now, David Gurra, thank you so much. Tonight, 8 p.m., Balance of Power. Joe Matthew, Kaylee Lyons, David Gurra with his coverage from Philadelphia, and afterwards they do the spin room thing.
Yeah.
You should see Gurra in the spin room. He's like an act of God. Looks like one of the teacups at Disneyland out in Anaheim as well. David Gurra, thank you for that. It's 109 today in Phoenix, but critically the low is 81. So you say to yourself, that's unlivable, except by one statistical study, Paul Sweeney, 86% of Phoenix is air-conditioned or better.
Better be.
Basically, the technology makes Phoenix go. AC.
Mean, and our next guest, he's a native of the Pacific Northwest, but he's been out there in Phoenix. I just see the news, Tom. it's been brutal for those folks out there in terms of the heat. Bill Smead joins us here. He's here in lovely, cool Midtown Manhattan, CIO, Smead Capital Management. Bill, what do you make of this market here? I mean, a lot of folks are just saying, I'm not buying it here. But I turn around and I say, hey, the Fed's going to be cutting rates. Earnings seem to be okay. Isn't that a constructive environment for markets, for equities?
Well, the market can stay insane longer than you can stay solvent.
Okay,
right?
I've heard that before.
So our view of this is that we are in a, 4 or 5 year process of beginning to unwind the fourth major financial euphoria episode of the last 100 years.
Oh boy, that doesn't sound good.
So the 1929, it was the adoption of radio. You know, Charlie Munger said that if you have a financial euphoria episode and you add a legitimate development, you're mixing raisins with turds and you end up with turds.
Okay.
So the legitimate development in 29 was radio. The legitimate development was walking on the moon and all the technology born by it in the 1960s.
Yeah.
The legitimate development was the internet is going to change our lives, and now the legitimate development is artificial intelligence. So you've got everything you need. We had 1% money for 3 or 4 years. Participation is the highest in the stock market, and the percentage of assets in the Fed Z1 report in common stock is through the roof. So, what's next?
The 3-year, 5-year track record of the Smead Value Fund is like no other in the Bloomberg universe. It is off the chart, 97th percentile, 95th percentile. And of course, we've had some growthiness here for the last 12 months. How do you perceive the when of a shift from growthiness over to where Smead Value wins?
Well, that's a great question, and I'll bring you back to the question of when we had the 1% interest rates for a few years. And so we were arguing that interest rates would normalize at some point in time. And people would say, Bill, when's that going to happen? And I'd say, well, you can't hold your breath till then. Well, the same thing happens on the euphoric side in common stocks. It might be 6 months, it might be a year, but when it hits, it's so quick. I mean, remember how fast the Fed raised rates. They went from a quarter to 5 1/4 in a year. It was the biggest interest rate increase in a year. And if you weren't ready for it, you got caught by it. Well, the same thing will happen in the equity market. In other words, Buffett used to talk about it being like Cinderella at the ball. You've been told that at midnight the clock is strike 12.
Okay, I'm glad you bring this up. Mr. Buffet owns Apple big. Even if he sold some, he still owns Apple big. Bill Smead doesn't own Apple, right?
That's correct.
But you're both perceived as value investors. Discuss.
Well, a lot of our good long-term track record came from buying broken growth stocks in 08 and 09. We came out of the bottom with Starbucks being our biggest position.
Starbucks at one point was your biggest position?
Oh, yeah. We had a huge move.
Wait. We gotta break some news here. Has Bill Smead had a pumpkin latte?
Well, I was in Seattle, remember, for 40 years.
Yep.
And I can remember when it was the most popular stock on the planet, and they had trouble back then, and the stock got very depressed. I think we paid low teens multiple to buy the stock. And people that we'd worked for years who knew I was a value person in nature and our firm was a value person in nature said, Bill, no one's going to want a $4 cup of coffee. Well, guess what? That is the only luxury people kept in 10, 11, and 12. All the other luxuries went out the window. But overspending twice a week.
Twice a week? Twice to 12 noon. Ask Lisa Mateo. Paul, get one more in here.
So talk to us about energy here. We've got WTI crude oil below $68 a share, but I know you guys have historically had a big exposure to energy. What's the energy call today?
Well, we used one of your charts from Bloomberg here in our piece today. The major hedge funds that are tracked have the lowest exposure to oil and gas right now that they've had any time in the last 10 years.
Give us a name.
Well, probably the cheapest name in our portfolio is probably Apache.
Really?
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah,
Wow, a name from the past.
Yeah, and that's been kind of a glamorous name a few times in that when the business is doing well. But I think it's natural gas exposure that.
Do they have the systems internally that Anadarko had?
That's a great question, but I don't have the answer to that. You went above my pay grade.
Okay, Bill Smead, thank you so much. Congratulations. Don't be a stranger. Just love when you're in New York. Can we interview you when it's under 100 degrees in Phoenix?
Sure can.
Okay, we'll do that. Bill Smead, thank you so much. Paul, get Mr. Smead up here because we got to. John Tucker, he bought value at the top, so he's got a 201k. Bill Smead will give John Tucker some pro value tips here. On the way, John Tucker, have we had the opening of the 401k envelope?
No, it's up to a 401k.
Really? You're back to normal?
We're back to normal.
Yeah.
Maybe even knocking on the door of possibly one
Are you? Would you like to announce your retirement now? Is it Sparta's emailing me? What's he saying?
Like Paul, we'll both be dead before retirement.
Very
That is our
good.
retirement plan.
Red and green on the screen now. The VIX 19.51, still ticking with our news from New York City. John Tucker.
All right, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Possible hurricane could hit the Gulf Coast this week, disrupting energy supplies and more. And Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carroll tracking what is now Tropical Storm Francine. Rob.
John, Francine is located 400 miles to the south-southwest of Cameron, Louisiana, and it is headed towards the central Louisiana coast. Looks like it's going to strike it by early tomorrow afternoon as either a Category 1 or Category 2 hurricane. That means even as far east as the New Orleans area, we could see some rather strong winds and heavy rainfall. The good news is the system should be moving fairly rapidly, and it weaken tomorrow afternoon and evening as it heads inland, and it brings quite a bit of rainfall to portions of the lower Mississippi River Valley and the mid-Mississippi River Valley later in the week. John?
All right, Bloomberg's Rob Carroll. We are just hours away from the first and maybe only debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And Bloomberg's Jody Schneider has more on the ABC News presidential debate.
Kamala Harris was not supposed to be on this debate stage, but then when she took over for President Biden as the nominee, she is now facing a big test. She hasn't debated in years. She and Donald Trump have not matched before, we're told. So this will be, really a chance for her to define herself to the people, to the public, in a policy-oriented way. We saw her at the Democratic convention, but there it was really her story. Here it's what is she going to do as president, and also define herself against her opponent.
Bloomberg's Jody Schneider, part of our team coverage of the ABC News presidential debate, all kicks off tonight, 8 p.m. Wall Street time, in a special edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television. This one from the New York Times, buying that $23 Honeydew's cocktail when attending the U.S. Open, kind of a rite of passage in New York. This year, during the tournament that had more than its fair share of fun, there was a new novelty treat on which tennis fans, foodies, and social media influencers trained their focus. $100 box of chicken nuggets, created by the
thank you.
team at, I'm going to mess this up, Coco Doc. Luxury Manhattan fried chicken restaurant that itself can be famously hard to book.
Joining us now, surveillance open correspondent Paul Sweeney. Did we partake or were we Chick-fil?
No.
This was at the club level. I don't know.
Okay.
So
I don't know. It's fast-moving.
$100 for chicken nuggets.
Yeah.
That sounds like,
There's a Chick-fil-A down the block here. We can go try that out.
Okay, we'll try that. John Tucker, thank you for that nugget of wisdom.
Oh, there you
Futures
go.
up 11. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, we've got green on the screen now. Markets preparing for more economic data. Consumer price index set for tomorrow. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures up about 0.2%, 42 points. Dow futures up a tick, about 4 points. S&P futures up about 11 points. We have the 2-year yield at 3.67%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 3.72%, and that's up 1 basis point. To currencies, the Japanese yen weakened. Sources saying BOJ officials, they're seeing little need to hike rates next week. Right now, we have the Japanese yen up about 0.1%, 143.03 against the dollar. We have the euro weaker. British pound stronger. Bitcoin up about 0.5% at 57,000. To earnings we go. We have Oracle up 7%. Reported quarterly profit. Bookings topped estimates, and that was a big thanks to AI demand. Shares of BMW down 7% in Germany. Carmaker cut its outlook for the year. It's pointing to this faulty braking system from a supplier caused a recall of 1.5 million vehicles. And finally, some changes at Southwest Airlines. Chairman Gary Kelly stepping down along with 6 directors, facing pressure from an overhaul from activist investor Elliott Investment. Now, Southwest did say it supports CEO Bob Jordan, who Elliott has been trying to push out. Shares of Southwest up about 0.2%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Appreciate that. We do equities, bonds, currencies, commodities. Big focus on equities recently, obviously. The emotion of August, early August, the emotion of September, early September. But we've ignored FX a little bit, and that's when you go to the force. Jane Foley joins from Rabobank in London. Just wonderful on the synthesis of foreign exchange. Jane, there seems to be not an outlier call, but a belief of a few that the euro must weaken, which I believe means a dollar will be resilient or stronger. Is the dollar broken? Is it now on a vector that is weaker?
You know, I don't think the dollar is broken. Certainly, we've got to get through the next few months. We've got to get through how many interest rate cuts the Fed is going to do. We've got to get our heads around that. And of course, the US election, too, which will obviously have a big influence on the US dollar. But, you know, if you listened yesterday to Draghi's speech, now he, of course, had published this paper yesterday, which was commissioned by the European Commission to really address some of the structural issues that Europe was facing. And he was talking about the need for Europe to find new investment worth 800 billion euros every year to match really the growth prospects of both China and the US. If you look at a chart of productivity, for instance, over the last few years, you see US productivity so much higher than that of most of the other G10. So the US fundamentals in that respect, in terms of productivity, in terms of growth, are certainly still stronger than Europe. And you know, from that point of view, I would say one of the biggest surprises in the FX market this year is the fact that the euro has managed to, it's sort of vying with the dollar for position of second best performing G10 currency in the year to date, despite Germany's economic woes, despite the movement of the far right in European politics, and despite, you know, all of these budget issues, particularly that of France.
Jane, here in the U.S., it's a very political environment. It's a political year, election year. We've got a big debate tonight. Does the foreign exchange market, how does the foreign exchange market discount kind of just politics here in the U.S.?
Well, I mean, obviously, you know, foreign exchange, like other asset prices, can only move in a binary way. So it therefore tends to simplify, you know, politics down to, you know, is it a buy or is it a sell? And what it's done, and I think we saw this very much in June after that TV debate between Biden and Trump, very much, you know, the Trump trade, that people putting on bets that, oh, you know, it looks like Trump will win this election. And therefore, what are the sort of policies that we might have from Trump? Are they going to be a bit more fiscal stimulus? stimulus. We are going to potentially have more tariffs. And that, of course, meant for the dollar, well, if we were going to have more stimulus, if we were going to have more tariffs, there's going to be more inflation, and therefore the prospects of less Fed easing than we would have otherwise. Now, of course, over the last 7 weeks or so, we've seen Harris, really bring some fresh momentum into the Democratic bid. And that, I think, is why the FX market will be watching tonight. Will she be able to sustain or build on that momentum or not? And I think it's going to be really interesting to see if she does build on that momentum, whether or not some of these Trump trades begin to, further fizzle out.
So, Jane, I'm looking at the pound sterling here, up about 5% over the last year or so here. Is that sustainable here for the sterling here? I mean, you've got a budget coming up. Talk to us about sterling.
Well, sterling is the best performing G10 currency in the year to date, and it was the second best performing G10 currency last year.
I know.
Did you hear our voice?
I do,
Exactly.
but
in honor of the Queen and the coronation of King Charles, Jane Foley on Strong Sterling.
The Irish Jane Foley. So, so it is, it has performed well. But what I would say is that it's not really a strong currency, not if you look at long-term averages. And I think what we've got to remember is back in September 2022, cable was at the lowest rate ever, and that was on the back of the Liz Truss mini budget. And we also saw in September 2022, euro sterling really leap higher on the back of that budget. So what we're seeing, I think, since then is sterling slowly regaining its composure, slowly regaining its poise. It's not strong yet, but it is stronger. Right. And I think the mini budget will certainly be a hurdle as to whether or not investor sentiment can remain positive as it has done in the last few months.
So what is the bet? Forget about the speculation, the trying to make, two big figures on weak euro or that. What is your foreign exchange, not investment, it's always a speculation, but 90-day, 6-month trade, Jane Foley?
I still think the yen has got further to go. I mean, I think the Bank of Japan meeting on September the 19th isn't going to be about September the 19th. It's going to be, is October in play for a Bank of Japan interest rate hike? And certainly if October's not in play, well, yeah, I think December we're going to see another interest rate hike. So I think the yen can make an awful lot of ground. I think if we look back in 2 years' time, we'll still see the yen at these sorts of levels as being cheap. And the budget for the UK, I think, is going to be instrumental too, because are we going to look back in 2 years' time and think, yeah, you know what, sterling was so cheap 2 years ago? Or actually, is this budget going to make us recognize all of the problems that we still have in the UK economy?
So on strong yen, you can frame out 140, 150 down to whatever. I get that. Where's a 130 sterling? Can you frame out 140, 150 sterling, the ascension of the United Kingdom, an Irish experiment?
Well, I think for sterling to get back to 140, we would have to see more better news on growth. Now, this year we've had, better than expected. We're doing okay in terms of the UK economy and in terms of growth, but there's an awful lot of headwinds, particularly in terms of the debt. Starmer, the Prime Minister, wants to see debt at 2.5%. Now, that would be exceptionally strong given the UK's recent record. So no one's really anticipating that. But if he can get, closer to 2%, I think sterling could see that. But there's a lot of ifs and buts in order to get from A to B. And I think we would need some more positive relationships with Europe, which Starmer does want to create. We'd have to see investment coming back into UK stocks. We'd have to see, the government tax policy, which is what the budget course is going to be all about. Not throwing investors' attitudes away. How much more is there going to be on capital gains tax, for instance? So there's a lot to play for right now. And at least that the new government does understand that. But in certain respects, the Chancellor's got her hands tied behind her back because the fiscal situation in the UK is looking really quite poor.
Fascinating. Jane Foley, thank you so much. Always informative. With Rabobank there, sort of a nudgy CFA language, but strong yen and possibly a bid to sterling as well, being the arch theme there. We'll get more from her in the coming months here on FX. I mean, it used to be easy. You looked at dollar yen, you looked at euro dollar, and tried to act posh and fancy and all that. And now it's like it's a science, Euro Swissy and the rest of it.
Well, when you go over to Rome, you'll have your dollars will be doing just fine, I think.
We're looking, we're trying to get weak euro to happen, and so far we're going down in flames. We got a good tape. We had red and green on the screen. No, futures up 14. The VIX 19.33. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. A slight lift to the markets. Investors looking to balance U.S. recession fears and the likelihood of a soft landing. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures up about 0.3%, 56 points. Dow futures, little changed, up 23 points. S&P futures up about 0.2%, 13 points. The 2-year yield at 3.66%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 3.71%, and that is little changed. To commodities, spot gold higher, $2,506 an ounce. We have Brent crude $71 a barrel. WTI crude $67 a barrel. Shares of Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing, they're up about 0.5%. In Taiwan, revenue jumped 33% last month. AI spending holding up. The smartphone market starting to recover. Maersk said it's growing a risk of a U.S. dock worker strike with no labor agreement yet reached. Shares were lower in Copenhagen, but now they're up nearly 1%. And finally, David Solomon said Goldman Sachs' trading revenue set for a steeper than expected drop this quarter from the prior year. Yeah, declines in fixed income. There you go. Shares down 0.5%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. Our economic indicators through the week, and particularly key inflation data tomorrow, CPI data, is brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors, the 2-to-1 advisor to staff ratio, small firm attentiveness, big advisor impact. Go to commonwealth.com to learn about their consultative support in technology. Peter Scheer with us right now, head of macro strategy at Academy Securities. And Peter, it's Audible Tuesday here at Bloomberg, so I'm going to Audible. My grandfather in the dining room had the wooden clubs in the corner, and he did better than good, like Varden and other giants before Arnold Palmer. And he would talk in Connecticut about a golf course near Darien that was the authentic, not the long ball, not Greg Norman. Greg Norman could hit the first tee and it'd go out, somewhere in Long Island Sound. Woodbury's totally different. You're playing there 8 days a week. What is it about a course made in 1916?
It's an original Willey Park course, so we've kind of gone back, redesigned it, made sure it's kind of staying true to that. And it's just fun every day. It's very walkable too. It's designed to be walked.
Yeah.
So you get the fresh air, you have fun. It looks easy. It plays hard, especially for me. And just the ability to talk to people at the golf course, the different perspectives you get, that's been a fun part of life.
Do you use more traditional, older clubs on it instead of the new stuff that Damien Sassauer uses?
I use the newest and best stuff I can possibly get my hands on. And the worst thing is, every year we have a tournament, you only play with 2 clubs, and I think I score about 3 strokes worse with 2 clubs than with the whole bag, but you can't help but try.
Woodbury Golf Course up in Darien, Connecticut. It's truly historic. My grandfather used to talk about it years ago. Paul?
So, Peter, when you're playing golf with your buddies, I'm sure they're asking you about the market. Peter, what do you think about the market? What are you telling them today here? We've got a Fed that looks like it wants to cut rates. We've got earnings that are pretty solid. What's your view of the market these days?
I would say, first, I think there's a bit of a disconnect. The data has been coming out okay-ish, and, finally we're seeing a little bit of potential, maybe not soft landing data, and that's what people have been talking about a while in their own businesses. I think everywhere people are seeing a little bit of less spending, less need to hire, and that's finally coming through the data. And then the other part really has been in the markets. Where do we stand on AI? Yes, AI is transformational. Yes, it's good. Yes, it's going to get better. But are we overpaying for it right now? Have companies that don't really have a use case for it overspending? And I think that's where we're at right now. And we're going to see a bit of a slowdown. And that's going to drag markets down for the coming weeks.
Yeah, my personal AI index is just NVIDIA, because I felt like for a while there, that was the only stock people were buying to try to get exposure to it. And of course, that's down about 20% from its highs. So how does the market reprice for maybe a more rational view of how AI is going to impact the economy in certain companies?
I think all those stocks that have benefited really from both the AI direct, from the chip manufacturers to the data providers, even to some extent the utilities, I think people are going to question, do we have too much of a growth cycle built in? So we pull back a little bit. Unfortunately, in this world where the S&P and NASDAQ are dominated by so few stocks, it doesn't take many stocks to drag those indices down. That's part of why we've gone up. So I think you will see the small caps value, maybe some of the smaller companies even within the S&P do okay. It's going to be more the big tech valuations come down.
Then how do you allocate?
So right now, underweight or trying to even be short some of those versus trying to get long value.
So whoa. You're short Apple for the brave?
NASDAQ 100 right now. That's kind of where I want to be short. Going to scale into it a little bit.
See how he wants to walk out of the studio right now?
Everything, it's been a little bit choppy, but we're back down on the NASDAQ 100, basically to where we were on August 2nd, not down to August 5th lows. I think we break through that as kind of some of this euphoria wears off. And my one key indicator, if I have to look at one thing lately, it may sound stupid, but I look at NVDL, which is a 2 times leveraged NVIDIA ETF. I have no idea.
NVDL?
I have no idea why it exists.
I'm pretending I don't know what this is. I'm day trading like crazy.
But yeah, why we have 2 times leveraged single stocks, but that continues to get inflows. And I think that's going to have some outflows or some serious concerns. Because like you said, NVIDIA itself is down 20%. But this is
that's
down
done
50%.
well. Wow.
Except for recently, right? It's this double leverage, and there, even just simple volatility, it erodes at your returns. If you go back, I think it was a month ago, NVIDIA's unchanged. NVIDIA L's down 18%. I want people to kind of get sucked. That to me is my froth indicator right now.
Double leveraged NVIDIA from the peak, the nirvana of June 18th, down 46%.
Yeah, that's 2x from kind of what the stock has done there. So. Peter, do you think we take out those August lows?
I do. I think so. Part of it is, I think people got very comfortable that we'd seen capitulation, right? VIX supposedly hit 65, but that was 8:30 in the morning. VIX futures never got much above 40. So I think people piled back in saying, ooh, this was the washout, this was the capitulation trade. I don't think that's yet come. I think we are going to get that. I think whether the debate spurs some of this, I think our own elections are kind of going to be a little bit negative for markets. So all these factors are coming in, and to me, people got very complacent and very happy that, oh, we had this washout trade. I think it was a fake washout. We get the real washout this time around.
Peter Scheer on China. Paul's been asking this question better than me, but I mean, come on. The gloom there is ginormous. Do you push against the gloom and go the other way?
You know, I'm starting to look back at Chinese stocks again. We've kind of been off it for a while. I'd liked it at the start of the year a lot. What I am watching, and we've had this made by China theory that China is going to try and sell more and more of their brands globally. That's going to put margin pressure on companies. I think last week we just saw you guys did a report in Germany. The number 1 EV selling is BYD, right? So you're starting to see these Chinese brands, whether it's Temu, helping push some of those brands we've never heard of into, first it's going to be the emerging markets, maybe Western Europe a little bit. It's going to be slower to penetrate in the U.S., but I think that it's going to cause some margin pressures. Again, you look at the phone companies. The Chinese phone companies have made great strides within China. They're trying to sell those brands outside. So I think you nibble at China as part of this whole rotation trade.
Right. What about yield right now? I mean, we were talking, Paul Sweeney and I were talking about the Sweeney yield, the 2-year yield. I mean, it's back to 22 levels here.
So I'm more comfortable with the 2-year, though. I think we've got 8 cuts priced in the next 6 meetings. I think that's 1 or 2 too many. I think we get 6 in the next 6 meetings, so there's a little bit room there. I think the 10-year is way too low. I think that should be much closer to 4%, and I'm hoping, knock on wood, that the 10-year auction and the 30-year auction coming up this week put some pressure on yields, because I don't think it's sustainable here.
How much credit risk, if any, do you take in this marketplace? A lot of credit folks are saying that the spreads are just too tight.
I'm actually fairly fine with credit. I look at it that this is much more a valuation than a recession risk. So if we were really talking recession, I'd be worried about credit. But I think this is more about valuations. We might get some bumps along the way. And the one part to me that I still feel very compelling in credit is not only do you have the private credit really pushing in, but now a lot of the big banks are realizing they're not generating the net interest margin they need on corporate credit. So they're trying to lend, especially the leverage companies. So I think if you support the bottom part of the market, that goes all the way up. And I think people are going to continue to look at governance and say, you know what, maybe Apple, Microsoft, some of these really well-governed companies, lots of cash, can trade tighter than they currently are.
Where's the shadow right now? It's September. I saw a great bar chart. I'm sorry, folks, I can't cite it. I'll give Barron's credit, but I'm guessing. But it was a great bar chart of all the months over 100 years up, and September's ugly, ugly, ugly. Where's your opportunity to rethink and reposition in September for February of next year?
Now, I think that's a great point. Again, I'm starting to look at the small caps and value in particular. Maybe we nibble a little bit at China. I want to be underweight the NASDAQ. I want to see that to kind of sell off. And maybe the other wild card, which everyone doesn't want to seem to talk about, but it's creeping up in more conversations, is the consumer, right? The U.S. consumer has been the stalwart, right? We're always spending, and you're finally starting to see consumer credit look stretched. You're seeing signs that your travel slowdowns. Everywhere there's little bits of slowdowns. If the consumer starts rolling over into year end or early next year, that's very problematic, and that tips us from bumpy landing to maybe hard landing.
Peter Scheer, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. And particularly the comments on a magical golf course up by Darien, Connecticut. 1916.
Nice.
I mean,
it's old. That's an old course. I mean,
yeah, it's like you use wooden clubs. I thought Scheer would be out with the wooden clubs and the the knickers and all that.
You think you could find a newer course?
Yeah, you should see him in Scotland. Scheer's it's unbelievable. He's on like 8 inches of rough. He's like this is just like Woodway.
Yep.
Peter Scheer, thank you so much. The market. Do we know why the market's lifting? I do not
I
know
do
why
not
the
know.
market's
I do
lifting.
not know. I don't know.
We're up
We'll find some
14.
smart people.
You know, it's a nice little lift. I mean, the NASDAQ's given us some love here. You know, I think maybe it was the announcement that Tucker's back from a 201k to a 301k. NASDAQ up 0.3%. With our news in New York City, John Tucker.
All right, Tom, Paul, and Lisa, SpaceX launching a rocket carrying 4 private astronauts to space, part of a groundbreaking mission aimed at performing the world's first commercial spacewalk.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and go Falcon, go Polaris.
Copy 1 Alpha.
Well, on board the mission called Polaris Dawn is billionaire Jared Isaacman, who previously flew to orbit with SpaceX in 2021 and provided funding for the flight and its development. And the countdown on for the highly anticipated presidential debate tonight in Philadelphia. Bloomberg's Amy Morris looking at how the candidates are preparing.
Vice President Harris's strategy, in part, is reportedly to hold former President Trump accountable while maintaining a calm demeanor on stage. Harris's challenge is that she's not well defined to a lot of potential voters. Donald Trump, on the other hand, is quite well defined. People know him. His strategy may be to change some perceptions and soften his edge a bit. Bob McNally is a former White House energy advisor to President George W. Bush, and he told Bloomberg News what he'd be listening for.
I hope they get pressed on their respective plans for Iran, because in terms of what's going to affect the pump price for you, me, and our neighbors, I think it has to do with Iran.
Bob McNally talking with Bloomberg's Joe Matthew. This debate is the biggest opportunity the candidates may have to reset the conversation and their image now that the conventions are over and officials anticipate a huge viewing audience. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
And officials are tracking Tropical Storm Francine as she churns in the Gulf of Mexico. The outer bands will impact the Texas coastline as it veers eastward through Louisiana's basin and then to the states just north. The storm could become a Category 2 hurricane by Wednesday when it is expected to make landfall. The founder of Single and the City, this is an organization that puts on speed dating events in New York and Austin, says singles are out of practice. They've forgotten how to engage with people face to face. It's supported by a new Stanford University
You do this
study.
just to aggravate me.
Yes, it supports the conclusion that the pandemic virus sparked a recession in America's social lives. For millions, dating and other social activity never actually recovered. And the effects aren't just personal and psychological, but also economic, even political. The idea is you meet, you move in, you get married, you have kids, you buy a house, a car, and then you fight, and then fight some more. Generates a lot of
What is this,
stuff.
Dr. John? The therapy I'm getting
I'm
here.
just saying, this is an actual scientific study.
Lisa's behind you, chowing down a bacon and egg
Lisa,
and
are you
cheese
single?
McGriddles, and she's laughing. She
Could
can
you
barely-
imagine the economic activity she could generate?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
but
mean,
you're married. Never
just-
mind. Forget it.
So a singles thing is all dead. Is that the summary?
Well, they're
of
out
this?
of practice and they're not, doing what they do normally, generating all that economic
I
activity.
mean, having a beverage of your choice at a club and a bar. And
Could you imagine what we could teach them? The experience in this room.
John Tucker, you are on troubled ground. Futures. Let me do a data check and save the marriage. Futures up 17, Dow futures up 43. The VIX 19.21. We are minutes away from Lisa Mateo getting done with her griddle burger.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures in the green. This is as investors gear for another key inflation report out tomorrow, a key U.S. presidential debate tonight, and also the European Central Bank's policy meeting later in the week. We'll also get more Fed speak today. We have the Fed's Michael Barr and also Michelle Bowman speaking. Right now we have NASDAQ futures up 0.3%, 70 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 49 points. S&P futures up 0.3%, or 17 points. The 2-year yield at 3.65%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 3.69%, and that is little change. To commodities, we have spot gold higher $2,510 an ounce. Brent crude $71 a barrel. WTI crude $68 a barrel. Moving the markets, avocado supplier Mission Produce, ticker AVO, up 17%. Reported fiscal third quarter revenue topped analyst estimates. And then U.S. online grocery shoppers, well, they're getting some relief. Data from Adobe, it shows that online grocery prices fell 3.7% in August from a month earlier. That was the largest decline since the company began tracking numbers, in 2014. So prices starting to go down online grocery shopping, not in store yet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
I don't know where that is in a bunch of years. I mean, people buying online versus people going out like you are buying 6 carriages at, whatever store. But I mean, in 10 years, are we all buying online? Is that like where we're heading?
More people. My sister's a big Instacart fan. I don't know if she does all her online
What do you
shopping.
do, Paul?
We go to the store, old-fashioned. We have fun.
It's an event.
It's an event, exactly.
It is.
Get out and about.
Did you buy Gold Bar when you were at Costco
I did
last
not.
time? You did not go to the Gold Bar?
Got a hot dog, though.
You got a hot dog, no Gold Bar.
gas.
Bloomberg Surveillance this morning. We're brought to you by Interactive Brokers, their portfolio analyst. Consolidate, analyze all your financial accounts on one powerful dashboard for free. Sign up for Portfolio Analyst. Do that at ibkr.com/free PA. One more time, ibkr.com/free PA. One of our recurring themes this morning has been the 2-year yield, lower. Blake Gwynn, head of U.S. Rate Strategies, RBC Capital Markets. Blake, just easy question. How low can rates go?
I think this is about it. I mean, we're pricing in, very good premium for these 50 basis point cuts, a pretty low terminal. I'm one of the more optimistic guys you're going to talk to. So, I do think over the next 2-3 months, it's going to take some time, but I think eventually we'll see data kind of stabilize. If not, see some tailwinds heading into 2025, and that markets eventually, now this is a longer term story, but markets will eventually have to deal with a potential short Fed cutting cycle that looks more like a 95, 98.
So where are you on duration then? I mean, you're not out buying 10, 20-year paper, are you?
No, like I said, it's a difficult story. I think our thesis on the economy, our thesis on the Fed, it's really best for kind of long-term positioning. I think in the short run, we're going to be very tactical. I think the fact that we've had these kind of mediocre NFP prints, the start of Fed cutting, I think there were a lot of kind of big real money buyers that really just wanted to see that first cut to really get the green light to start adding duration. So I think it's going to be very hard to sell off to a large degree here. But I think over a 3-4 month type of time frame, when we head into 2025, when we get past the election, when we have the cutting cycle going on, that's where I think we can start to kind of reframe the terminal rate discussion and kind of where the Fed's headed. But it's just going to be very difficult for the next month or two to see yield sell off in a major way.
So, Blake, assuming the Fed begins cutting rates here in a couple of weeks here, how do you expect that cadence to go over the next, 6 to 12 months? Is it every meeting, every other meeting? Do they front load it? How do you think the Fed's going to actually get it done?
Yeah, I moved to every meeting cuts at 25 basis point. I still think the bar is relatively high on 50. I think Waller gave some interesting comments, when he was speaking the other day post NFP. In the written text, he said, when he was talking about the conditions for a 50, in the written text, it just said, I need to see further deterioration. But when he was actually delivering the speech, he stopped and said, deterioration, not softening. That was an emphasis that was not in the written text. So he clearly felt it was very important to say, look, it's not just going to be softening in the data. It's not going to be stasis in the data. We need to see deterioration before we're going to those 50s. Now, that being said, I think the Fed's very content to leave this premium for 50s priced into the curve because they're kind of having their cake and eating it too. I mean, they're getting the easing of financial conditions by having these deeper cuts priced into the market. But at the same time, they only have to go 25 basis points, and they lower that risk that they over loosen.
So what do you see is the issuance dynamic? I mean, given selective uncertainties, Peter Scheer was just in saying they're not going to go 14 rate cuts, whatever. What do CFOs do? What do corporations do as they readjust their bond presentation?
I mean, I think a lot of times, we put a lot of emphasis on the Fed as far as, corporate credit and things. And I think, spreads, obviously, I think some of those plans are much more driven by kind of all-in yields about where spreads are. And so the Fed's only one piece of it. And I think, like I said, I mean, we have that easing priced in now. And, if I was personally sitting in that seat and I had the view that I have that the economy is going to do better, that the Fed's not going to cut as much, this may be a great opportunity because you do still have that premium for a harder landing, that premium for 50 basis points priced in. And if you believe, like I do, that, 3 or 4 months time, that may start to disappear, maybe this is a very good opportunity for that.
Boy, it seems like the market's already been working, pushing yields down. I got the 10-year Treasury 3.69%. Where do you think we end up the year, Blake?
So I actually think we can get back above 4%, not much more above that, but I think we can get back above 4%. I would also say, I mean, we're all kind of very ultra focused on the Fed and, the labor markets over the last month. But it wasn't too long ago we were really talking about the election. And both of the past election cycles, we've seen yields sell off in a pretty big way out of that. So I think we've got both candidates, regardless of who wins. I think you're probably looking at a larger deficit. Obviously, Trump has been kind of the steepener trade, if you will. So I think you get more of a sell-off pressure there. But if we just look at the last two presidential election cycles, we have sold off from November to December in a pretty decent way. So I think that's still a risk that's out there. I don't think that's central to our case. I think my case is driven more around, this kind of economic positivity and kind of where I see the Fed discussion headed. But let's just throw that election on there as a risk.
Blake Wynn, thank you so much. RBC Capital Markets, bond chat this morning. It's, as you said the other day, Paul, I was taking notes. Price up, yield down.
That's what I've been
That's
told.
how it works.
That's how it works in the fixed income market.
You and I are looking, what's Apple doing? You know.
I just go to Lisa Bromwich. She's my credit, she's my
What
bond
color
person.
are you going to get on the iPhone?
I don't know. I mean, I usually just kind of go to standard black, but I'm going to have to go get a little creative this time.
I mean, the smaller one has many colors, very, pink and teal, and it's like a bright, cheerful thing.
Anurag Rana from Bloomberg Intelligence says, get the 16 Pro. That's what he told me to do. That's what I'm going to do. Yeah.
I will get the bigger one, the Pro Max.
The Pro Max. Okay.
I'm just I mean, it's even bigger than this one. I don't know. Maybe it's too big finally. I don't know. There is an accident in New York. For those of you worldwide, and particularly for those of you with tunnels in your city, like Boston, I think is a city very much like New York. And I'm going to piece this through. Help me out here. New Jersey Transit buses, Paul, experiencing major delay. There's a crash in a Lincoln tunnel, the middle tunnel.
No, not
that runs under the Hudson River. I don't want to be too inflammatory about it, but it's led to residual delays of 90 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, you think about all the arteries.
John
that go
Tucker
in
will
and
have
out.
more on
He'll
this.
have more on that, but you think about all the arteries that go into and out of the Lincoln Tunnel. Jeez.
Yeah. And of course, the construction project there, because they're really starting it. I mean,
they're more than starting it.
There's photographic evidence of a new Hudson River like there was a new Boston years ago.
It is. It's amazing. And I'll give credit to the folks that are building this thing out there because there's thousands of people out there every day. And every time I take the train by, I look out and I say, that's new. That wasn't there last week. And they're just adding more and more, bringing some of these new tunnels, new bridges. I don't know what's going on out there, but they're doing a good job.
Yeah. Surveillance correction. A correction this morning. I said Woodbury on Gulf near Darien. It's Woodway. I misspoke to say the lease. Futures up 17, Dow futures up 46, the VIX 19.16. There is that point on, I believe, an autumnal day, and the VW bus comes down the road with James Earl Jones, Field of Dreams. Good morning, everyone.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Apple's still minting more money than God, right?
Geopolitics front and center for global Wall Street.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
U.S. Secretary of State discussed the conflict in Gaza.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Lisa Mateo, Michael Barr on assignment. We may have a Michael Barr attendance here late in the hour. We're trying to schedule that with his people right now.
Okay.
Phone in,
Okay.
or, whatever.
Who knows where he is?
Figure it out. Government's working on that. We welcome all of you on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Great live chat out on YouTube. Thank you for that. It's great. We're talking about the Lincoln Tunnel. Small accident there. John Tucker will have coverage on that as well. Apple CarPlay, Android Auto as well. And along the eastern seaboard from Washington, 99.1 FM, Bloomberg 11.3 our flagship in New York. And good morning, 92.9 FM in Boston. It's from Mount Katahdin in Millinocket down to the National Hotel. Got an email. Did you know the National Hotel? It's Victorian, and the rooms are like Victorian basic.
Yeah, they're not playing around.
They're popping $400, $500, $600 a night.
Block Island, right? That's
I thought it was
solid.
like Motel 6.
How do you get there? You have to take a ferry.
Got to take a ferry. Point Judith. Good morning. Point Judith, Rhode Island. One of the ways. I think you can come from Long Island, like the Hamptons.
Okay, I'm sure my yacht can get there. No problem.
The yacht. We'll take
Jersey
leases.
Shore.
I mean, that'll work out as well. Red and green on the screen. Even some red with a lift now. Futures up 16. Dow futures in the vicinity of 41,000 again, up 49. NASDAQ up 0.3%. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Yeah, you said it. We've got some green on the screen after three major indexes kicked off the new trading week with gains of at least 1%. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.3%, 61 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 47 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, 16 points. The two-year yield 3.65%, down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.69%, and that is little change. To commodities, want to point out oil. We have Brent crude $71 a barrel. WTI crude $68 a barrel. Chevron has joined Exxon, Shell, shutting some wells. This is ahead of Tropical Storm Francine. And then companies making news, that's Apple and Google, both companies losing multi-billion-dollar court fights with the EU. We have Apple down about 1%, Google up 0.8%. Alibaba shares higher in Hong Kong, up 4%. Its stock was made directly accessible to investors in mainland China for the first time. And finally, that changeover at Southwest Airlines Chairman Gary Kelly stepping down along with 6 directors. And this is after facing pressure from activist investor Elliott Investment. Yeah, that is Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. We'll have some on that as we can. One of the great distances in America is the distance from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, described by the Pennsylvania Turnpike, that historic turn at Altoona, the land of Rolling Rock. And we've got to get that in.
Sure.
But David Gura is on the eastern side for tonight's debate. David, I assume 2 candidates will speak to the people of Pennsylvania. Are they speaking to Philadelphia? Or are they speaking to Pittsburgh?
I think that the focus is mostly on Pittsburgh, but of course this state is so crucial. Commonwealth, forgive me, so crucial in this election. And I think both the candidates are aware of that. You look at the travel schedule after this debate, Tom, Vice President Harris going down to North Carolina, then back up here, basically could take out a second home here in the state at the time that she and spending here Donald Trump is as well. So they understand the importance of it and look at the electoral history over these last few cycles, how it's gone back and forth. Neither candidate taking this state in all its diversity, economic and geographic, for granted, spending a lot of time here, knowing that it's going to be on a razor's edge here come election night.
David, when you speak to the Trump campaign officials, what are their goals for this evening?
You know, what they've been hammering a lot over these last few weeks is the fact that Vice President Harris hasn't done a lot of interviews. She's only done one. She hasn't had press conferences. And so they're using this moment tonight as an opportunity to stress that and say, look, Donald Trump is out there. He's fielding questions. The American people know him and what he stands for.
Right.
That's not true of Vice President Harris. So they see this as a test and a moment when they can kind of convey that more to the American electorate on the debate stage tonight. And we saw that in a memo from two of former President Trump's key campaign advisors, laying that out there, showing the fact that he's willing to take questions. There's nothing novel in that sense about what's happening tonight. We'll see how Vice President Harris responds to that. But she has so far kept to these larger events, not done those interviews and not done press conferences. Former President Trump headed to California at the end of this week to have another press conference, the second one he's had here in just a matter of days.
The distinction, folks, is Gura actually really studies the polls. I sort of glance at him. David, out of this debate, and as you mentioned, California, North Carolina, and other states, it's the first time I've asked this question. Is Florida in play?
I don't think that it's characterized as one of those big swing states, but I will say what the Harris camp, for instance, is looking at are more opportunities here for Electoral College wins. So they're stressing their sizable operation on the ground in many states. I'd say Florida's solidly in that second tier, not the first tier of those swing states.
Yeah.
So not like it used to be, I think, 4, 8, 12 years ago.
Does Trump have people in every state? Does the former president have an organization, as you just discussed, of Vice President Harris?
It is not nearly as large or as formalized as the one that Vice President Harris has, which I should say she inherited from President Biden. She had taken over that campaign wholesale. So it's not the same in terms of its size and scope and mechanics and the kind of investment that we've seen from the Democratic side we haven't seen on the Republican side with former President Trump.
David, I guess given the rules here, this is unlikely to be a rough and tumble debate, is it?
I don't think that it will be. There will be some spirited moments, I'm sure, and I know that both camps are looking for opportunities to kind of knock the other candidate off his or her game. But you're right. Having those microphones muted is going to create kind of a strange dynamic. They can still take jabs at one another, and no doubt they'll respond to it. We won't be able to hear the audible of what they're saying. But we're at a point now where these debates are very formalized affairs. There isn't a lot of scrappiness to them. 2 minutes for an answer, a minute for a rebuttal, and moderators who very squarely want to stay in control of what's happening on the stage at the National Constitution Center tonight.
David Gura, thank you so much. 8 p.m. tonight, our coverage of the debate in Philadelphia, Balance of Powers. Joe Matthew and Katie Lyons with Mr. Gura, the debate at 9 p.m. As well. Omar Aguilar now with us with Schwab. Omar, thank you for this too brief discussion here. We've got breaking news in New York, but let's get something in. Omar, how have you reallocated into September after what we witnessed in August?
Well, I think the opportunities, continue to open up. We continue to work with our clients to deploy cash as they extend duration to using intermediate, bonds and high quality bonds as sort of a way to start extending duration from what it used to be a very cash heavy, portfolio. We also continue to encourage them to go into areas like small caps and international as a way to diversify from what it used to be just a heavy concentration on the mega caps and on the MEG 7 large cap growth exposures they had.
Omar, what is your expectation for what we will see from the Federal Reserve come September 18?
Yeah, well, the Fed, I think, can feel very, very comfortable thinking that the soft landing they have been trying to do for a while, it seems to be happening. And therefore, the expectation is they're going to go 25 basis points, even though all the data and all the economic activities should suggest that they should go for 50. There is really no reason to keep that, higher level of rates, as they have now, given where we are in the economic conditions. But they also feel very comfortable that even if they keep it at that level, given that the economy is not as sensitive to interest rate as it used to be, they feel that they can take it slow down and pace themselves a little more, and therefore they're going to be very disciplined. They're going to be 25 basis points each time they meet, and unless they see a serious deterioration in the economy, they will go for 50.
Do you link AI worries into the performance of the MAG 7, or can they be discrete from the chit-chat over the future of AI?
Great question, Tom. Our belief on the MEG 7 is really more about the economic progression and the EPS growth projections they had. And, they have been running at an incredibly level, and the level of free cash flow yield that these companies have generated over the last 5 years is impressive. However, if you look at the ratio of what is their capital expenditure is to their ROI, clearly, the projection of what that means for EPS growth is not consistent with the level of valuation they have today. So it is is one of those things like, a great sprinter that is going really quick in the first part of the marathon, at some point is going to run out of gas. And it's not because it's not a good athlete, it's just because it's very hard to keep the pace. It's the same situation that happens with the projections for EPS growth. And therefore, while we still think it's a pretty good investment, it's not going to be easy to maintain those multiples.
Omar, thank you for the time. Too short a visit. Let's do it longer next time. Mr. Aguilar is with Charles Schwab. Futures up 17 with our news in New York City. John Tucker.
The first and for now only debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump just hours away. The candidates facing off for about 90 minutes tonight for the ABC News presidential debate. And Bloomberg senior Washington correspondent Saleha Mohsen says this will be a unique encounter for at least one reason.
We're going to see Kamala Harris meet Trump. It's going to happen before our eyes. They're going to meet for the first time, shake hands for the first time ever. That's also rare. We're seeing Harris prepare methodically, like a student, like she did in law school, as a prosecutor. And Trump is a chaos agent where there are no rules.
Well, Mr. Trump has agreed to ABC's rules that microphones will be muted when it's the other candidate's turn to speak. The Harris campaign had lobbied against that, saying it would put the former prosecutor at a disadvantage. In our coverage of the ABC News presidential debate, that begins at 8 p.m. Wall Street time on a special edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television. Well, we had a liftoff.
4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and go Falcon, go Polaris.
SpaceX Falcon 9's launch of Polaris Dawn to low Earth orbit from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The mission intended to include the first fully commercial spacewalk using spacesuit technology developed by SpaceX. And according to the FBI, Americans were duped out of more than $5.6 billion last year through fraud schemes involving cryptocurrency. The FBI says it received nearly 70,000 complaints in 2023 by victims of financial fraud involving Bitcoin, Ether, and other cryptocurrencies. A legendary actor with a legendary voice. That's how James Earl Jones is being remembered. He died Monday at the age of 93. In Disney's Lion King, he was king of the jungle. He was also the voice of Darth Vader and even CNN. Jones was born in Mississippi back in 1931. And from the Mirror, problem snorers have been offered new hope. An epilepsy drug found to work against obstructive sleep apnea. A randomized clinical trial of 298 people finds that half the existing drug, solthamine, saw dangerous respiratory pauses in the night reduced by 50%. Until now, the only treatment was a continuous positive airway pressure CPAP machine or mouthpieces. A lot of people find they're unable to sleep with them on. Global news, 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. Tom's actually snoring while I'm doing this report. This is Bloomberg.
No, my husband has a CPAP machine. It's very difficult.
But
he doesn't like it?
We're going to do this with Gurman.
Hates it.
We're going to do this with Gurman, and the answer is Apple's working. I don't think it's out yet.
Well, it's a
sleep
detector.
apnea
It doesn't
and also
help you
hearing.
with it. It just says you have it.
I don't know.
I
don't know.
Do you have any more personal medical problems you'd like to reveal about your spouse on the air, Lisa? Because we're all ears. You're on Bloomberg Radio.
Lisa, is there something you want to tell us here? Because everybody, out on YouTube live chat thinks you're going for a job interview today.
Doesn't she look it?
Oh, because of the jacket?
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
Very,
For my
very
YouTube,
professional.
got my little. I'm freezing. That's the
That's what it is. I'm freezing. Yeah, that sometimes happens here, to say the least. Futures up 16. The VIX 19.16. In Washington, New York, and Boston, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Right now, futures, they're in the green. NASDAQ futures up 0.3%. Dow futures, little change up about 38 points. We have S&P futures up 0.3% or 16 points. We have the 2-year yield at 3.66%. That's little change. A yield on the 10-year 3.69%, and that is little change. Want to check spot gold right now, higher, $2,513 an ounce. We have Brent crude $71 a barrel, WTI crude $68 a barrel. To earnings we go. Oracle up 9%. Quarterly profit bookings topped estimates. That was a big thanks to its AI demand. Shares of cybersecurity company Rubrik down 4%. It reported earnings, but here's the thing. Bloomberg Intelligence says that doubts about growth in the second half of the year could linger. And finally, shares of BMW falling down 7% in Germany. The car maker cut its outlook for the year. They pointed to this faulty braking system from a supplier, caused a recall of 1.5 million vehicles. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Across the nation now, lucky to get him on because he's interviewing to be defensive coach at University of Michigan football after what happened with Texas the other day. Mark Gurman joins us. Mark Gurman, definitive on Apple. Mark, tell me the relationship of the frenzy I see from T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T to sell 1,000, 1,200, 1,400 iPhones. Is that why Tim Cook's smiling? Because he knows the wireless companies are going to sell these things regardless?
Wireless companies indeed are going to sell these things regardless, Tom. I mean, despite the fact that these are iterative updates, you have one pent-up demand from prior years, people who didn't upgrade, and the Apple brand is really, truly as strong as ever, right? So despite the fact you're not seeing a lot of changes here, people are going to buy these new phones anyways. People are excited about them. People like the new colors. People like the new camera features. So, for Apple, despite them doing very little, it's always an exciting time in every September.
You're not doing buy, hold, sell, but what's your vector on the so-called service business? Paul, this is where if you have umpteen children, these $2, $4, $12 things hit your checking account. Mark, do services take off with these new toys?
I think services continues to expand, right? I mean, the services business is interesting because at some point you're going to see Apple move to a more AI-infused search engine. At some point, this Google deal that generates about 18 to 22 billion a year from them is going to fall off a cliff because regulators are seriously investigating it. So that's hanging in the balance right now. You're going to see a little dip probably. But at some point, when they switch to an AI-based search engine, deeper integration with ChatGPT to replace Google, a new deal with Google Gemini to replace Google Search, Gemini being Google's AI service, you're probably going to see things rebound, right? And so I am optimistic long-term about the company's services business. The one thing I will say, though, is when was the last time you downloaded an app, right? So the app paradigm where people download apps and Apple takes a commission from there, that's sort of dwindling. The industry has moved to more of a services and subscription model, right, where people are paying monthly for these things, and that makes this especially more lucrative for the company. They're not making money off of app downloads anymore. They're making money off people subscribing to in-app purchases.
Interesting. So, Mark, the other piece of major news for Apple today and Google, Apple loses EU top court case over 13 billion euros in terms of a tax bill. How important is this to the company, or is it just one more of these regulatory headwinds that this company faces?
Apple is a very PR and marketing-driven company, right? And so for them, this is something that is not great news, but they're going to do everything they can to sort of sweep it under the rug. And so here's what they're going to do. This is not going to impact, the Apple revenue number you're going to see them announce at the end of October when they talk about Q4 earnings, right? They're going to position this as an extra tax bill, right? So on the balance sheet, their effective tax rate is going to go up significantly because of that $10 billion charge. It's not like they're making a new cash payment that's coming out of their revenue. It's not like their operating expenses are going up. This is tax, right? This is how they're going to position it. And this is money that's been in an escrow account between Apple and Europe for several years now. And so they're going to downplay this as much as they can. And to answer your question, this is just another regulatory hurdle. And, companies do face regulatory hurdles from time to time, right? But Apple and some of these other companies, they've been facing a lot lately, and they're probably going to face more.
Mark Gurman with us, folks, and for you worldwide, when you see, according to Bloomberg, I mean, nobody, Paul, his property, output, journalistic output, is stolen at Bloomberg or worldwide in tech like Mark Gurman. Mark Gurman, when you look, and it's Tim Cook with the rainbow, and they're inside that fancy building I assume you've been in a bunch of times. When you look at that, what's your longevity, your shelf life of Tim Cook?
Yeah, the Tim Cook succession story is one I've been following extremely closely. In fact, following Tim Cook's succession and the succession of Apple's management team is top 3 in my priority list, and it has been for the last year or so. Tim Cook is, pushing 64. The rest of the Apple executive team, they're in their early to mid 60s. And so you're going to see this massive changeover of Apple management over the next several years. And you're seeing this starting later this year with the CFO, Luca Maestri. He's stepping down to CFO at the tail end of this year, and he's going to move to more of an advisory role in charge of things that are like information systems, real estate. So a much more minute role compared to what he was doing before. And you're going to see other Apple executives move into these smaller roles over time as well. Tim Cook, it could go anywhere. I mean, I've heard people speculate that he's going to leave in the next 2 to 3 years. I've heard people believe that he's going to stay until he's 70 plus and pull a Bob Iger, right? But technology obviously is a younger person's game. They have an heir apparent there. His name is John Turnus. He's the senior VP of hardware engineering. Truth be told, there's really no alternative to him, to anyone else but him being the new CEO down the road. So I think that plan's in place, but it's going to be a scary time when Apple begins that real changeover.
Mark, nobody cares. All they want to know is Mark Gurman going to buy the new iWatch? You're out on Twitter. You had to do a Gurman correction on the iWatch. Which swatch are you going to buy from Apple so you can be cool in all those secret meetings you're in?
Well, I was originally thinking about the Apple Watch Series 10. I liked the one with the Link bracelet. And then I thought about it. What's the difference between the Series 10 and the Watch Ultra that I'm wearing right now? It's really battery life. It's double the battery life on the Ultra versus the Series 10 model. And if you want to wear this thing to sleep, if you want to use the sleep apnea detection, if you want to do the sleep tracking, it's kind of difficult to use an Apple Watch that's basically going to run out of battery after the end of the day. Before you go to bed, the watch is going to be gone anyways, right? And so you really kind of need a 2-day battery life. So for me, the Apple Watch Ultra, first of all, the new black color looks incredible. Even though there's nothing different, I will be moving from the silver one to the black model. The other component here is that battery that I mentioned, and the screen on the Ultra is a third brighter than the screen on the Series 10, so you're getting a bit of better brightness there too.
Look at that.
And next year, I expect a bigger revamp to the Ultra.
See, it's like Mr. Consumer Guy.
I know.
Paul's taking notes here.
I am,
because
absolutely.
Are you going to buy 3 or 4 of these things? Mark Gurman.
Oh, that's funny.
Way too early in your morning. Thank you so much. And I suggest the interview in Ann Arbor. You can do both. You can be defensive coach of the 0-1 or 1-1 Michigan, and also continue world-class coverage of Apple. Can't say enough, Paul, about his newsletter note.
Yep.
He and Lucas Shaw are just killing it.
They are.
What is it about Los Angeles?
Los Angeles, I mean, they got those offices in Century City.
No, they don't. They're at the
awesome.
Sunset Tower Hotel
Exactly.
poolside comparing notes.
Hotel Marmont. Yep. So, but they're out there. They're players. They got the 2 young guys out there covering the tech and media and entertainment.
Can't say enough about their newsletter. Sign up for them. Lucas Shaw and Mark Gurman was a power on.
Yeah.
And Lisa, help me. Screen time.
Yeah,
Screen time. I got it right.
good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Screen time and power on. Those are powerful notes from Bloomberg News. Real journalism, not gossip, but just like this is the zeitgeist. This is what's going on. Why are we up? Why am I up 20?
I don't.
Well, please.
A little lift. We had a nice trade yesterday, nice market after
it was a nice
Friday
rebound
debacle.
yesterday.
So we're coming back a little bit.
I was completely in cash, so
Yep, you're safe. Sleeping like a baby.
Oil 68.56. West Texas Intermediate. Gold 25.43. From New York City across the nation worldwide. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney with your opening bell report. Now, a lot on tap this week that could affect the market. CPI tomorrow, PPI Thursday, import prices Friday. Tonight, we have that key U.S. presidential debate and also the European Central Bank policy meeting later in this week. So let's see how things kick off on a Tuesday for Tuesday trading. S&P 500, we'll start there, up about 0.3%, 20 points at 5,491. The Dow up 0.1%, 60 points, 40,884. And the Nasdaq up 0.3%, 65 points at 16,948. We have the 2-year yield at 3.66%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 3.70%, and that is little changed as well. We have spot gold higher, $2,513 an ounce. Brent crude $71 a barrel. WTI crude $68 a barrel. At the open, want to check in with Apple, Google. They lost multi-billion-dollar court fights with the EU. Apple saying it actually expects to record a one-time income tax charge in its fourth fiscal quarter of approximately $10 billion after losing that battle. We have Apple down about 0.6%. Google up 1%. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Tom and Paul.
I greatly appreciate that. Ed Ludlow out with some nice research on the Apple charge in Ireland. It is escrowed in Ireland. The Irish Times with a great essay this morning. It's already escrowed. It's already put aside. It's in European debt, paper, bills, bonds, whatever. The way I look at this is take free cash flow guesstimate forward. How many days of free cash flow is 13 gazillion? You ready?
Yep.
43 days.
Yep, no problem.
Like it's like, and as Ed Ludlow brilliantly says, there's like literally 8 companies where you can even have this conversation. Ed Ludlow, thanks for that. They'll do much more on Bloomberg Technology today on Apple. Down a little bit here. I got red and green on the screen open for trading. I don't know what to make of the tape. I think we're waiting for CPI tomorrow.
You're waiting for CPI. I mean, I think the Fed's already kind of made its decision based upon the labor data, because that seems to be the fight they're fighting these days is the labor market, the unemployment, feeling like inflation by and large in terms of CPI and PCE and all those types of data points. That's been pretty well managed at this point.
And the revisions, I think, are really, really key. There's no question about that. The revisions in the unemployment rate, the revisions in non-farm payrolls, the normal 2-month look back, Paul, the broader look back that Dr. Wong has been so good on now. Finally, the stars have aligned, and joining us now after 3 trips to Mondo Burrito at Levi's Stadium, section 415, is Michael Barr. Michael, I don't care about the Jets and the 49ers. The food at Levi's is legendary. How wonderful was it?
Man, oh man, I overate. I mean, Levi's is great. I mean, second to none. The hospitality, Brian, if you're listening, you are the man. You really hooked this up, man.
What's the number one thing in Meadowlands, the Jets and the Giants, the New York, New Jersey Jets and Giants? What's the number one thing they can learn about football after your attendance at Jets 49ers?
Well, yes, a San Francisco 49ers fan is a diehard fan. Not like Philly, but they, and I wore my Detroit Lions shirt because I hold a grudge, and they were very friendly. We were slapping high fives all in the stadium, and it was fun. And of course, Linda loved it, and she, obviously because the team won. But oh my goodness, it's a beautiful facility.
And Michael Barr, how good are these 49ers? With no Christian McCaffrey, and they took care of the Jets pretty easily last night.
Yeah, I was surprised because as we're heading to the stadium, it's like, I'm hearing, the chatter all of a sudden, there's no CMC. I'm like, what? And as I check it, I'm like, oh my God, he's a late scratch. Right. It's like, what happened? But I tell you, man, it's like Mason, man, is just great. I love my man Mason.
Now, are you return visiting Michael Barr December 30th, 8:15? I'm guessing it's Sunday Night Football. Lions 49ers. Are you going to reserve the Gulfstream off of this again?
You know what? A lot of fans said, we'll see you in December. I'm like, yeah, you're right. You might.
Safe travels, Michael Barr. Miss you. Thanks so much for that. Michael Barr in San Francisco taking in Monday night.
Mrs. Barr, very happy.
Football. Yeah, I guess so. Right. Joining us now, one B. Ritholtz, Barry Ritholtz with Ritholtz Wealth Management, host of Masters in Business. Barry, the seasoned adults you talk to in investment, how much are their heads spinning after the first week of August and the first week of September?
You know, the general sense is we tend to overemphasize seasonality, and then suddenly seasonality hits us with a big rush. That first week of September and the whole Japanese carry trade unwind. You know, at least in August, there is some rational hindsight bias, narrative fallacy explanation for what took place. September is just, hey, I guess things are more random than we realized.
So how do you think about seasonality, Barry? Is that something you even worry about? Or are you just more, I'm in the longer term time frame type thing, and I just maybe dollar cost average or just put money to work when I think there's value?
Right. For our clients, you know, they're primarily families and some small foundations and endowments. They're thinking 5, 10, 20 years. What happens in any August 4th is irrelevant to them. On the other hand, you do have normal reactions from humans who are going to respond with, hey, is this something serious? You know, it's amazing. It's 15 years, right. Almost 16 years after Lehman blew up and the financial crisis that was part of that, and AIG and Merrill and Bear and everybody else. And there's still lingering PTSD. There's still the sense that, hey, is this another one of those? You know, not every 3% pullback becomes a 5% correction, becomes a 10% drawdown, becomes a 20% crash. And yet every time that memory kicks in, people justifiably get nervous. You just have to remember what happened afterwards and how the markets and the economy recovered.
Barry, a really important interview. And folks, this is the joy of Masters in Business. How long is a typical Masters in Business, Barry? 3 hours?
Anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes.
60 to 90 minutes.
Unless it's Bill Gross, and then it's 3 hours.
Yeah, but the difference here is Tom Keene goes to Mike Wilson. Mike, what's the market going to do? Barry's really talking about the adversity that Mike Wilson went through over the last 24 months. What did you learn from Mike Wilson of Morgan Stanley?
You know, first of all, your track record makes a big difference in how people perceive you, and your ability to say, hey, I may have gotten this, and this right, but I got this wrong, and here's why I'm reversing that prior call, because what I expected to happen and the various metrics we track that would confirm this have not showed up, and therefore we're going to unwind this immediately. People respect that. Most people in finance hate to admit they're wrong. And, you know, I've been reading Ray Dalio for, I don't know, almost 20 years. And Ray is the first person who, another guest on Masters in Business, who had made being wrong and making a mistake and having investment errors a core part of his process, which is mistakes are inevitable. You can ignore them or cover them up, or you can learn from them and integrate what you've learned into your process. And
Paul,
he's obviously been wildly successful at that.
I can't convey enough, folks, what Mr. Ritholtz said, how important that is. Paul, get one more in here.
Barry, so going along those lines, I mean, a lot of the successful hedge fund managers, they do have kind of parameters. Hey, if X security is down Y%, we're selling. Is that a good strategy?
If you're a trader, absolutely. If you're an investor, it's a terrible strategy. Listen, I began my career on a trading desk, and I will never forget what the head trader drummed into everybody's head. It's okay to be wrong. It's unacceptable to stay wrong. I mean, that is trading lore 101. And so if your timeline is measured in hours or seconds, well, then you can't stay long for it. But on the other hand, if you're a broad asset allocator, if you're buying stocks and bonds, not individual companies or derivatives or options, then you're going to allow time to work in your favor. If you're buying individual stocks or options or bonds or whatever,
Right.
and you're on a P&L measure, you get paid weekly and you get an annual bonus based on how well you
Right.
do. You can't afford to stay wrong because you never want to allow a small recoverable loss to turn into a
Right.
debacle from which there is no recovery.
Barry Reynolds, thank you so much. An important conversation with Mike Wilson, Morgan Stanley. Look for that. Masters in Business on Bloomberg. Red and green on the screen, a churn to the market. With our news in New York City, John Tucker.
All right, Tom, Paul, and Lisa. Possible hurricane could hit the Gulf Coast this week, disrupting energy supplies and more. Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carolyn tracking what is now Tropical Storm Francine.
Francine is now less than 400 miles to the southwest of Cameron, Louisiana, now moving north at 5 miles an hour. It'll be turning more towards the northeast later tonight and tomorrow. It's expected to hit the Louisiana coast midday or early afternoon tomorrow. That's why a hurricane warning is now in effect from Morgan City, Louisiana to Grand Island, Louisiana. The city of New Orleans and the areas to the Pearl River east are under a tropical storm warning. We expect the system to come inland tomorrow afternoon as a Category 1 or 2 hurricane. I'm Rob Carolyn, Bloomberg Radio.
Thanks, Rob. And we're just hours away from the first, maybe the only debate between Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. And Bloomberg's Jody Snyder has more on the ABC News presidential debate.
Kamala Harris was not supposed to be on this debate stage, but then when she took over for President Biden as the nominee, she is now facing a big test. She hasn't debated in years. She and Donald Trump have not met before, we're told. So this will be, really a chance for her to define herself to the people, to the public, in a policy-oriented way. We saw her at the Democratic convention, but there it was really her story. Here it's what is she going to do as president, and also define herself against her opponent.
That's Bloomberg's Jody Schneider, part of our team of coverage of the ABC News presidential debate. All kicks off tonight, 8 p.m. Wall Street time, on a special edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television. The Russian Navy has started major drills that are planned to involve more than 400 vessels in multiple locations and showcase its cooperation with the Chinese military. Russian President Vladimir Putin plans to join the exercises known as Ocean 2024 via video link from the Kremlin. And a new study finds the amount and proportion of the powerful heat-trapping gas methane that humans spew into the atmosphere is rising, helping to turbocharge climate change. In 2020, the last complete year for which data is available, the world put 608 million metric tons of methane in the air, up nearly 12% from 2000. This one from the Daily Mail. British YouTuber Aaron Maney has set a new Guinness World Record by building the world's largest smartphone. The huge device measures almost 7 feet tall. It weighs as much as 200 kilograms. That's about the same as a bottlenose dolphin. I don't know where they came up with that. Incredibly, the device is fully functional, complete with a touchscreen, apps, working camera, 400-watt flashlight, charging port, and more. The video shows the YouTuber playing games on the streets of London and getting a friction burn on his finger while scrolling social media.
So it's almost the same size as the phone you still have, like the one that was in the Michael Douglas movie 25 years ago.
Still works, still holds a charge.
Holds a charge.
Sends out calls and gets calls in. That's all you need, really.
Do you understand, John Tucker, when you go into the Apple store or the phone company, the price tag on these new phones? No one bothers. There's nobody at Apple saying, and this phone is...
Will they take a rebate with my old Motorola?
They could trade in. Yeah.
The BlackBerry?
You could trade in.
Bring it.
It's
Why
a
not?
huge racket. I mean, the whole trade-in thing is big at the wireless companies. I think, John Tucker, Lincoln Tunnel, serious stuff, tied up.
Yeah, I'll get an update on that in just a moment. But if you were coming into the city, lots of headaches this morning.
John Tucker, thank you so much. Red and green on the screen, nationwide, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Stocks are mixed. Traders gearing up for tonight's U.S. presidential debate and also a key inflation reading. Yeah, CPI out tomorrow. We have the NASDAQ up 0.3%, 53.16,937. The Dow, little change, down about 11 points, 40,818. The S&P 500 up 0.3%, 18 points at 5,489. The two-year yield at 3.66%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 3.69%, and that is little changed. Over to commodities, we have spot gold higher, $2,509 an ounce. We have Brent crude, $71 a barrel. WTI crude, $68 a barrel. Shares of Tesla up 2%. Deutsche Bank named Elon Musk's EV giant its top pick. And then BMW shares lower, down 8% in Germany. It lowered expectations for the year. Faulty braking system from a supplier. It caused a recall of 1.5 million vehicles. And Southwest down more than 2.5%. Changes over there. Chairman Gary Kelly stepping down. 6 directors as well. Pressure from Elliott Investment Management. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. There's a debate tonight, and it will not be discussed, but it's really front and center, and that is when the facts change, somebody better change. And there is no greater shock in the developed economy world, no, not the United States, I'm sorry, the shock that the Mets have won, 14 in a row? The shock that the Red Sox are 3 games out. Is that right, Ari? Is there 3 games out or something? Yeah, we could have a Mets Red Sox World Series. I'm positing that right now. Heidi Kribo-Redeker is at the Council on Foreign Relations, and she knows nowhere have the facts changed like in Germany. It's not going to be in the debate tonight. But Heidi, to your wonderful article in Foreign Affairs magazine on China's double threat to Europe, do these 2 debaters tonight completely underestimate what China has done to Europe and what they could do to American business?
So I don't think that the 2 debaters tonight underestimate China at all. I do think, and this is the point of the piece that I wrote with my co-author Liana Fix, this is really a blind spot for Europe right now on China. And the 2 threats are one on security, particularly China's support of Russia in its war economy, and then the other is really the overcapacity and the second China shock, right, particularly hitting EVs and the auto industry in Europe.
I mean, Heidi's got, Paul, this great photograph of the Munich Auto Show with EVs from China. Could you imagine the Detroit International Auto Show with a whole panoply of blue Chinese EVs? That's not going to happen.
Well, yeah, we'll see how that plays out. So, I mean, Heidi, we do have this debate tonight. I mean, as you sit back and think about it from your perspective, what do you think are the key issues for both candidates here? What do they need to achieve here?
So I think the first thing for Kamala Harris is, for voters who don't know her, is she a commander-in-chief? Can she be strong and calm and a steady leader on TV? And debates are very visual, so the optics matter. She's a prosecutor. She's fantastic. This is not a courtroom, though, and so she is debating Donald Trump. And so we've seen him debate before, but we've also seen him debate with Hillary Clinton. And so there are parts of this that will be not fair because she is a woman and she is debating Donald Trump. But I think this is going to be a chance for her to actually define herself, define what she stands for, right, and really introduce herself to the American voters.
Do you get elected, Heidi Kribo-Redeker, on foreign policy? I don't buy it. Do you get elected on foreign policy?
So the primary focus for everybody right now in the U.S. is the economy and prices, groceries, the cost of childcare, senior care, medical bills and all sorts of things that are like on the kitchen table. But I do think that Trump's answer to this tariffs does bring in the foreign policy angle in the foreign economic policy space, which it would certainly not bode well for any kind of relationships that we've built over the past 4 years with allies and partners if we suddenly slap for no reason 10% across the board tariffs on all of our good friends. So I think that is where you could see foreign policy really showing up as a major component of this.
So Heidi, how do you think the U.S. policy towards China should evolve? Should it be one of engagement with China, or should it be one of kind of isolation, if you will?
So I don't think it's not an either or of how it should develop. We have no choice but to work with and communicate with constructively as possible China. It's our largest geopolitical rival, and also the second largest economy in the world, and we do a lot of business with them. We want to maintain the trade relationships that we have with them, but we also want to do it eyes wide open and know that we have a second China shock coming right now with overcapacity. How do we make sure that the subsidies that China's provided for industry doesn't negatively impact the U.S. economy and U.S. workers? And then eyes wide open on the military side too. It's an aggressive neighbor, both in the South China Sea, North China Sea, and East China Sea, and pushing all sorts of barriers with its military actions together with Russia. It's something we have to keep our eyes wide open about.
Heidi, thank you so much. Incredibly good Foreign Affairs magazine efforts put out month after month. Can't say enough about it. Heidi Krevel-Rediker is Senior Fellow, the Council on Foreign Relations. An important essay removed from us, but nevertheless, there is the decline of industrial Germany to consider. Her article in Foreign Affairs magazine. Paul, I think we got to frame out the markets here. My head's spinning. It's September 10th. Got a big debate tonight. Gurman's down there. I mean, we're ready to go and, all that. But I just look at the market and I'm like, okay, we're going to get to the end September 30 and corporations are going to report.
Yep.
Some will win, some will lose. Who are the winners? I can't get a straight answer.
No, I mean, I think the economy, by and large, Tom, is while it has slowed, is still growing. And most of the folks we talk to, Tom, say the growth is still pretty solid. The labor market is still pretty solid. Interest rates are coming down. That seems pretty constructive for decent corporate earnings. And if you have a Fed that's lowering rates, a lot of the strategists that we talk to, Tom, say the focus is going to the extent it was taken away from, will now return to earnings, corporate earnings, and what type of numbers.
To me, it's earnings. It's the one thing Gina Martin Adams would say is margins have held up.
Margins
are they going to collapse?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. And then on the top line, that's been a little bit weak according to Gina Martin Adams, but they've made up for it in the last quarter. The S&P 500 with some margin improvement. So what you need to see from Gina's perspective is kind of a reacceleration here of revenue, and to the extent the economy is slowing, for a lot of folks, that could be a little bit tough here. But focus back on earnings, and because we have a Fed that's pretty darn clear with what they want to do.
James Earl Jones, Field of Dreams, and that. You go into a guitar store, and the cliche is play Stairway to Heaven. The other cliche that doesn't get nearly enough respect is a guy named Tom Johnston. And he was in a small startup band called the Doobie Brothers. Mm-hmm. And it was such a cool band because there were like 3 parts of it. And he never got the respect he got. And it's a chord riff he came up with at the 5th fret.
Oh boy.
That you have to learn.
Okay.
And it's just like Stairway to Heaven. It's just, you got to do it. And of course, speaking of classic, China Grove.
Yep.